She and Yang Yi looked at each other sweetly, then continued. But fortunately, because Yang Yi has always been by my side, comforting me and letting me get rid of the emotions of these songs, now when I sing these songs, I can more freely mobilize these emotions and no longer be affected by them. Seeing them showing off their love as if there was no one else around, the reporters really felt depressed in their hearts. Sorry, Murphy rushed back and needs to rest. Today's interview will end here, okay? Yang Yi protected Murphy as they walked out from the crowd of reporters who still wanted to continue. Only when they got into his nanny van did they completely get rid of these reporters. Near noon, in the guest bedroom on the second floor of the Yang family villa, Murphy, who was sleeping soundly, dreamed that a bear pounced in front of her. Suddenly, a slap landed on her face. This feeling was very real. "Hubby, save me," Murphy hurriedly shouted as she woke up from the nightmare and opened her eyes in a daze. In front of her eyes, a chubby little palm was indeed pressing on her face. However, this little hand was not as scary as the big black bear's. It was white and tender, and looked very tempting to take a bite out of it. Hee 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 hee. Murphy was still a little absent-minded, but when she heard Tong Tong's familiar laughter, her heart immediately broke free from the scary dream and returned to normal. "Mom." The little guy thought that he was playing with his mother. When he saw his mother open her eyes, he was so happy that he danced around. "You're up?" Yang Yi's magnetic voice rang out beside her. "Didn't you sleep well just now? Did you have a nightmare?" Without looking, Murphy could guess that Yang Yi had brought Tong Tong upstairs to wake her up. Actually, Murphy didn't sleep for long. When she got home, it was almost 10 o'clock. She still had to pick up Shishi for lunch later. If it wasn't for her terrible sleep last night, she wouldn't have taken a nap. Mo Fei stretched her hands out of the quilt, stretched lazily, and murmured in a nasal voice, "What time is it?" 11 o'clock. "Get ready, we're leaving." Yang Yi brought Murphy's clothes over. Actually, when he saw that Murphy was a little tired, he felt a little sorry for her. After he was done with other things, he even helped Tong Tong put on clothes and shoes before waking Murphy up. "I didn't sleep badly. I really didn't sleep well last night, and I had to get up early to catch a flight. It's more comfortable to sleep at home." Murphy got up from the bed and reached out to pinch her son's nose. Then, she knelt on the bed and hugged Yang Yi's neck with her arms. She said coquettishly, "You were the one who asked Mommy to wake me up. I was so scared that I thought a bear was going to hit me in my dream. I asked you for help, but you didn't respond." Yang Yi hugged Murphy's slender waist and kissed her forehead. He smiled. "It's all my fault." When Tong Tong realized that his mother wasn't hugging him and was hugging his father instead, he started to protest. He stood up shakily on the soft bed and tugged at his mother's pajamas. He pouted and called out, "Mom, hug." My son is jealous." Murphy smiled slyly. She pushed Yang Yi away and went back to hug her son. She glanced at Yang Yi proudly. "This time, I'm not the one who's jealous." Yang Yi didn't mind at first, but when he saw Murphy's proud expression, he felt that he had to play along with Murphy's performance. He gritted his teeth and waved his hand, slamming it down on the bed from the sky. His acting was very exaggerated. He even scolded angrily, "This little bastard, he still won't let me hug my wife. When I get back, I'll spank his ass into 8 pieces, 4 on each side." Murphy was amused by Yang Yi's expression. She hugged Tong Tong and laughed as she lay on the blanket. Chapter 948. Shishi, let's go eat. After the last class in the morning, Lu Xiaoyu opened the plastic bag from her school bag and took out her lunch box with a strawberry pattern printed on it. The little girl said excitedly to Cici, "I'm not eating lunch at school. My papa and mom are coming to pick me up for lunch." Shishi was a little apologetic at first, but soon the little girl became happy and said in high spirits, "My mom is back, but I didn't see her this morning. But my papa said that we can go to Yangcheng to play together." Wow. Lu Xiaoyu didn't know what to say and could only sigh with envy. "Little you, I'm going to Yangcheng to play. Do you want me to bring you a gift?" Shishi didn't care about her little friend's attitude. She just wanted to be closer to her good friend from the bottom of her heart. "You want a gift? Okay. Lu Xiaoyu suddenly became excited. At this time Lan Xian, who wasn't very happy this morning, slowly moved over and said with a pout, Shishi, I also want to go eat with your father. Shishi tilted her head and looked at Lan Xian with a troubled expression. But didn't your mom say that you have to eat at school? This morning, Yang Yi took the initiative to invite Lan Xian and Shishi out for lunch. Although Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai usually worked together to make Lan Xian lose weight, and were a little harsh on Lan Xian, Yang Yi still doted on Lan Xian. For example, if the little girl saved up 3 gold coins and came over for lunch, Yang Yi would try his best to cook some of her favorite dishes. However, Wu Jingjing knew that Murphy had just returned and their family was about to reunite. It was inappropriate for her daughter to get involved, so she declined when Yang Yi mentioned it. But I don't want to eat lunch alone at school. Lan Xian pitifully looked at her little friend and said sadly, Xian, let's have dinner together. There are 2 of us. Lu Xiaoyu said. No, I just want to eat with Shishi. Lan Xian covered her ears and turned her head hard, as if to say, I don't want to listen. Lu Xiaoyu's kindness was rejected, and the little girl looked a little disappointed. Was she going to eat alone again? How pitiful. But what if your mom doesn't agree? Shishi was still a little tangled. She was too principled. Of course, this was not a bad thing, just like there was nothing wrong with being kind. Lan Xian rolled her eyes and suggested, Shishi, can we have dinner together and not tell my mom? Shishi looked at Lan Xian with some surprise and said, But won't we be deceiving mom? If we don't tell her, she won't know. Lan Xian said indifferently. But we'll still be deceiving mom. Shishi frowned worriedly. How about? Lan Xian was in a dilemma for a while, and finally came up with a new idea. Let's have dinner, and then we'll go back and tell my mom at night. Then we won't be deceiving my mom. I'll tell her everything. Lan Xian learned the so-called kill first and report later, without a teacher. Shishi felt that something was wrong, but she really couldn't find a reason to refute. In the end, Lan Xian's little trick was thwarted in front of the adults. Although Yang Yi loved her, he didn't intend to help Lan Xian deceive her mother. Xian, be obedient at noon and eat at school. Uncle will ask Shishi to pack some delicious food for you and bring it back in the afternoon. Is that okay? Yang Yi comforted Lan Xian, who was in a bad mood. Lan Xian thought about it carefully. It seemed to be okay. Anyway, she had delicious food. She didn't need to be scolded by her mother. Only then did she regain her happy mood. She turned around and skipped to find Lu Xiaoyu for dinner. Murphy also carried Tong Tong, and went with Yang Yi to pick up Shishi. She personally gave her signed album to Li Ruolin. During this time, the 2 of them had a conversation. Murphy's main purpose was to get closer to Li Ruolin. After all, Teacher Li was Shishi's class teacher. If she helped and paid more attention, Shishi would be taken care of more at school. Li Ruolin took the album back to the office in a trance. She flipped through the promotional pages, posters, and photos in a daze. In fact, Li Ruolin had seen Murphy last time at Shishi's house. She didn't change much from the Murphy she saw today. She was still dressed simply, and her appearance and temperament were extraordinary. However, she didn't give people a feeling that she was unapproachable. If that was all, Li Ruolin wouldn't feel confused. She and Lu Xianxian liked Murphy's songs, so these few nights, they even watched the music chart show. So Li Ruolin saw that Murphy was radiant on stage, especially when she was singing. She definitely had the aura of a superstar and completely crushed the other small stars on stage. The quiet and cold Murphy indeed gave people a feeling that they couldn't get close to her. The Murphy on stage was so different from the Murphy in real life. Li Ruolin couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Are all stars like this? They're like 2 different people on and off stage? At noon, Lu Xianxian, who went to take care of Class 2's lunch break, found a chance to sneak back to the grade office. She went directly to Li Ruolin's desk and asked excitedly, Lan, how was it? Did they give you the album? Li Ruolin smiled and took out the album signed by Yang Yi and Murphy from the drawer, and gave it to Lu Xianxian. Beautiful. We can listen to songs tonight. Lu Xianxian said with joy as she took it and looked at it. However, Lu Xianxian didn't care as much as Li Ruolin. She looked at it and muttered, Why is this album so weird? Weird? Li Ruolin asked doubtfully. Is it broken? No, it's not broken. It's too good. Lu Xianxian pointed at the book-like packaging of the album in her hand. There were exquisite lyrics pages and poster pictures. She whispered to Li Ruolin. I remember that the albums I bought before didn't have so many things. Shouldn't a record be just a shell and a disc? I don't understand what you mean. Li Ruolin was confused. Lu Xianxian didn't discuss with Li Ruolin. She took out her phone and quickly searched for it. Soon she cried out in surprise, Wow! Wow! What? Keep your voice down. Don't disturb the other teachers. They need to sleep. Li Ruolin said reproachfully. Lu Xianxian didn't care. She pushed the phone in front of Li Ruolin and whispered, Look, this is a collector's edition. It's a grade higher than the ordinary album. You mean it's not the one you bought in the video store? Li Ruolin asked with some surprise. It depends on how you define it. Lu Xianxian smiled and said, The video store also sells collector's editions, but the collector's edition is more expensive than the ordinary edition. They sell it outside for 56 yuan. The money you gave to Yang Yi is only 18 yuan for the ordinary edition, right? Li Ruolin was dumbfounded as she said, That's right. Did I give too little money? She said with some self-blame, That won't do. I have to make up the difference. Okay. Lan, forget it. Why do you have to make up the difference? They don't care about this small amount of money at all. They took the money you gave before just so you don't take it to heart. Lu Xianxian smiled and said, If you insist on making up the difference, then it's a bit too tacky. Moreover, do you think it's enough to make up the difference of a few dozen yuan? Lu Xianxian pointed to Yang Yi and Murphy's signatures on the record. Just these two signatures, together with this record, can be sold for thousands or even tens of thousands of yuan on the internet. How are you going to make up the difference? Li Ruolin looked at Lu Xianxian in surprise. So much. Of course. Yang Yi and Murphy are famous for not liking to participate in commercial activities, so there are very few opportunities for fans to sign autographs. What's more, both of them signed at the same time. Lu Xianxian was now very familiar with these celebrity gossip. She spoke with assurance. Of course, this kind of additional value depends on how you look at it. If you want to sell it for money, there may be fanatical fans who will pay such a high price. But if you just use it to listen to songs, no matter what others think, it's only worth 50 yuan. There's another possibility. No one is willing to pay such a high price, so it's just an ordinary record in our hands. We can't sell it. Others gave it to us. If we exchange it for money, I'll feel bad. Li Ruolin couldn't help but say. Hee, I knew you would say that. Lu Xianxian smiled and said, Then you can listen to the song in peace. Don't think so much. It's just a few dozen yuan anyway. Since others gave it to you, they didn't want to take it back. Chapter 949. Murphy's trip to Guangzhou this time, other than participating in the chart-topping program, had another purpose. She was going to perform at a commercial concert on China's Top Voice. Currently, the remaining battles of the championship were being broadcasted on TV every week. However, these programs had already been recorded more than a month ago. The night of the summit would only begin on the 15th of December. During this period, other than the director and crew members who were preparing for the night of the summit, everyone else was free. The crew of China's Top Voice was not happy with such a waste of resources. The management companies and record companies that signed with these singers would not be happy either. After some discussion, they decided to organize a few city concerts for the top 16 contestants and coaches of China's Top Voice. Of course, these concerts could not really be called concerts. At most, it would be a commercial performance under the banner of meeting the fans. As the most popular singer at the moment, Murphy was also invited to attend the concert at Guangzhou Station and sing a song to warm up the audience. This could be considered a win-win cooperation. Murphy could add color to their concert, and Murphy could also ride on the popularity of China's Top Voice. Therefore, Mo Shaowan took a look at Murphy's schedule and accepted the invitation to Guangzhou Station. Yang Yi also brought the two children to the venue to watch Murphy's performance. The crew also wanted to invite Yang Yi to perform, but Yang Yi was worried about the children and declined. You rejected China's top voice, but you can't possibly reject my concert invitation, right? Backstage, Chen Yijie and Yang Yi laughed. You're preparing for your concert? When? Yang Yi raised an eyebrow and asked. At that moment in the waiting room, Murphy was having her makeup done. Tong Tong could not calm down, and had already escaped from his father's embrace. He held onto the leg of the chair, and lifted his head curiously to look at his mother who was having her makeup done. His big eyes were filled with surprise. He did not seem to understand why his mother's face was being touched by someone with a small brush. Beside him, she shouted and chased after him. Brother, don't run around. You have to sit over there with me obediently. When Tong Tong heard his sister's voice, he turned around to look. Then he chuckled and started running unsteadily. She couldn't let her sister catch her. The noise from the kids interrupted Yang Yi and Chen Yijie's conversation. Chen Yijie looked at the two cute kids and laughed for a while. Then he said to Yang Yi, yes, my national concert tour was originally planned for the end of this year. But for some reason, Tianxiang wanted me to avoid the limelight and change the date to next year. Of course, Yang Yi knew the reason. He also knew who was the one who led the public opinion, and made Chen Yijie and Tianxiang records so passive. But this is good too. Wait until next year, when China's The Voice's work is almost done. I can put more effort into my concert tour. Concert tours are very tiring, Chen Yijie said with a smile. Yang Yi nodded. He did not know about this. Murphy probably did not know either. She had held concerts before, but she had never held a national concert tour. Tomorrow, when she was organizing her own concert, Murphy would probably have to ask Chen Yijie for advice. Of course, Murphy's concert was arranged by herself, so the timing should not be too much of a burden for her. Chen Yijie continued. I've discussed with the boss. Our initial plan is to invite you and Murphy to our concert in Guangzhou. It will be held at the end of January. He smiled bitterly and said, in fact, I would prefer to invite you to the first concert we arranged in Harbor City, because you and Mo Fei are actually very famous in Harbor City. There are also many fans of the two of you in Hong Kong. Yang Yi knew about this. Someone in the company had calculated that Yang Yi had written a lot of Cantonese songs. Whether it was for Chen Yijie or Murphy, they were very popular in Hong Kong. Therefore, Yang Yi and Murphy were quite famous in Hong Kong. Of course, they could not be compared to Chen Yijie. After all, he was just a small songwriter. Chen Yijie continued to tell Yang Yi that the reason why he gave up on this idea was because he was still facing a lot of resistance in Hong Kong's music industry. After the storm, most of the fans would support Chen Yijie's development again. But in Hong Kong, there were still a lot of radical fans who were still brooding over Chen Yijie's betrayal. These radical fans would do some extreme things. Some people would throw stones at Chen Yijie's house. Chen Yijie's wife was so scared that she brought her children to their relatives' houses to hide. There were also some people who deliberately waited at the airport to surround Chen Yijie and verbally abuse him. Because of this, when Chen Yijie returned to Hong Kong, Tianxiang had to hire a lot of assistants and bodyguards for him. It was not that Hong Kong was very chaotic. In fact, such extreme people could be found everywhere. In South Korea, the anti-fans were even crazier. It could only be said that when one became a celebrity, one had to bear some pressure that ordinary people could not understand. Of course, what Chen Yijie encountered had nothing to do with Yang Yi and the rest. Chen Yijie just did not want to invite Yang Yi and Murphy to his concert, and attract some anti-fans for Yang Yi and Murphy. But I think it would be very interesting to attend your concert in Hong Kong, Yang Yi suddenly said as he listened. Chen Yijie was shocked. He asked curiously, why? Because I think it's unrealistic for you to keep avoiding this question. In the future, people will still talk about you giving up on Hong Kong's music industry, Yang Yi said. On the other hand, other singers who came to China to develop can hide behind your banner and develop secretly. But if you respond to this question, it's easier to not please both sides. Chen Yijie was not a fool. He had thought it through very thoroughly. Moreover, he had Tianxiang records behind him. That depends on how you respond. I think that if you can make the audience forget about your choice and make them stop paying attention to which music industry you're in and focus more on your current achievements. For example, You can highlight in the publicity that you, an artist from Hong Kong, have achieved in the mainland, which other artists from Hong Kong can't achieve. This kind of response should be successful. Yang Yi said. Of course, this is the company's response. I think you can change your personal response. Chun Yijia's manager was standing at the side. He had been quietly listening to the conversation between Yang Yi and Chun Yijia. At this moment, he could not help but ask, Yang Sheng, how do you think Yisun should respond? As a singer, of course, it should be through singing. Yang Yi smiled and said to Chun Yijia, didn't you say that you always wanted a high-pitched song to challenge yourself? I've prepared one for you now. It was time to take out that song for Chun Yijia. Also, Yang Yi thought of a song that was suitable for him to sing at Chun Yijia's concert in Hong Kong. Chapter 950. Jiangcheng was quiet and beautiful at night. The lights of thousands of households lit up every corner of the city and warmed the hearts of every member of the Gu family. Of course, if Guozian didn't spend too much time playing with her friends outside, the lights at home would indeed be very warm. Now, the bright lights at home were like a dazzling searchlight shining on her body, exposing her crimes without a doubt. It was almost 8 o'clock in the evening when Guozian opened the door carefully. She opened the door a little and sneaked in with her shoes. She couldn't stay idle at home during the weekend, so she made an appointment with a few of her girlfriends to play the dance machine in the mall. This was originally allowed by her family, but Guozian was so happy that she forgot the time. When her stomach growled and she looked up, she realized that the sky was completely dark. The girls then hurriedly took a taxi home. There was no luck. Tan Huijian, who was sitting in the living room watching TV, had heard the noise. She didn't even turn her head and directly asked calmly across the sofa, "What time is it?" Guozian, who had just put away her shoes and was about to sneak back to her room, suddenly shivered. The weather was always hot and calm before the storm. Her mother's words meant that she was already very angry. "Mom, I know I was wrong." Guozian quickly smiled and ran to the sofa. She pulled her mother's arm and said coquettishly, "I was playing and forgot the time, so I came back so late. But I promise you next time, I will definitely come home on time." Tan Huijian didn't know if it was because Guozian was more sincere in admitting her mistake, but she didn't continue to lecture her with a straight face. Instead, she patted Guozian's head and asked gently, "Have you eaten?" "No, we were playing and forgot the time. When we looked up, it was almost 7 o'clock, so we quickly took a taxi home. Then we were stuck in a traffic jam." "Mom, I'm starving," Guozian said quickly. Tan Huijian got up, took out the dishes that were still hot from the pot, and put them on the table. Guozian ate happily and asked, "Mom, where's Dad? Have you all eaten yet?" "Your dad still has work to do. I've already eaten with him." Tan Huijian picked up some food for her daughter and said, "You've grown up. You have to know how to control your time and take care of yourself in the future. Don't let Dad and Mom worry about you. Just like today, you came home so late and didn't even eat. Your father went to visit the needy people, but he still has to worry about you. Are you the needy one, or are they the needy one?" "Haha, Mom, what you said is really interesting." Guozian almost burst out laughing, but her mother glared at her. She quickly stopped laughing and nodded vigorously. "I know, Mom. I understand what you mean." Tan Huijian had a lot of thoughts today. The reason why she didn't reprimand her daughter was because she thought a lot. She sighed and said, "Actually, you're already very lucky to be born into a family like ours. Children from poor families take charge of the family early. For children of your age, or even younger than you, others have taken on the responsibility of a family early on. Let me give you an example. Your brother's agent, she doesn't have it easy." Tan Huijian told Guozian a story when Guozian was eating, and had time to listen to her nagging. She didn't notice that a trace of joy flashed across Guozian's face. "You mean Sister Ding Xiang? And the Sister Ding Xiang who's super good at cooking? She came to our house?" Guozian asked with a smile. "How could it be? Why would she come to our house for no reason?" Tan Huijian waved her hand and said, "When I was helping your brother look for his tablet, I saw a student magazine from their college on his desk. There was a report about Ding Xiang on it. I think you should take a good look at this article later." Tan Huijian didn't know that the magazine was secretly made by Guozi and Guozian. Of course, Guozi's college did have a student magazine with the same name, but it was just a rough booklet that only published some essays and essays submitted by the students themselves. Later, Guozian came up with an idea. Guozi asked Yang Yi for help, and asked the professionals from the Sahara Publishing House to make a cover with Ding Xiang as the cover character. Together with some of the previous articles, they reprinted it and combined it into a well-made magazine. However, although the magazine was fake and the reporter's interview and report were fake, the article about Ding Xiang recorded Ding Xiang's true story. Even if someone really investigated it, they wouldn't be able to find any problems. After all, Guozi just wanted his family to accept Ding Xiang, and didn't intend to fabricate a fake Ding Xiang. It was worth mentioning that the author's name was Mu Ziang. It was an article written by Yang Yi himself. Unfortunately, Tan Huijian and Guo Zhenyan didn't know about Yang Yi's gossip, so this small flaw couldn't be discovered. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Guozian pretended to be stupid and asked curiously, "What happened to Sister Ding Xiang? This child has a hard life. Her parents died when she was young, and she was only raised by her grandmother." Tan Huijian still showed the nature of a woman and said some more gossipy things first. "And she grew up in the mountains of Xiangxi. She studied with an old man in the mountains for so many years in elementary school. In such a difficult environment, think about how much effort she put in to be able to get into university. Sister Ding Xiang used to live such a hard life?" Guozian asked in surprise. "I couldn't tell." "It's true. There are photos of her in the magazine. When she just entered university, she was thin and tanned. She had to work to earn money for her tuition and living expenses. I heard that when she was busiest she worked 5 jobs at once." Tan Huijian sighed. "But even if it was so hard, she didn't fall behind in her studies, and she received the highest scholarship every year. Isn't that better than my brother? Guozi always thinks about making movies, and he often skips classes. If it wasn't for his good grades he wouldn't have been able to get the scholarship." Guozian said in surprise. "Sister Ding Xiang seems to be a straight A student too. That's because others consciously study and study seriously. No matter how busy they are, they still take time out to enrich themselves." Tan Huijian used Ding Xiang as an example, not because she admired Ding Xiang, but because she felt that Ding Xiang could be a good role model for Guozian, so she praised her in front of Guozian. "You also have to learn from Ding Xiang. No matter what, you have to put your studies first. Other people can study so well when they are busy making a living. Now that your family doesn't need you to earn money, and all your needs are fulfilled, there's no reason why you can't study well and have such bad grades." Tan Huijian finally put on a serious face, not letting Guozian continue to smile. However, Tan Huijian didn't know that when she was praising Ding Xiang, she gradually had a better impression of Ding Xiang in her heart. She was indeed a good child. Chapter 951. On Sunday morning, Murphy went to record a program, so Yang Yi didn't stay in the hotel. He brought Xixi and Tong Tong to the shopping mall under the protection of several bodyguards. This time, Yang Yi had promised Xixi that he would bring her to buy dolls, so he naturally couldn't go back on his words. However, it was different from Jiangqing City. Yangqing City's population density was higher, and he wasn't familiar with the place. So it was easy for a celebrity like him to cause chaos. Hence, Yang Yi asked Fu Jun for a few bodyguards so that they could help maintain order if the fans came over. Fu Jun naturally couldn't ignore Yang Yi's arrival in Yangqing City, so he treated Yang Yi's family to lunch yesterday. However, Fu Jun was too busy. After all, he was the boss of a company with a market value of over 10 billion, and he wasn't like Yang Yi. Thus, he couldn't accompany Yang Yi, so he could only arrange a car and bodyguards. Speaking of which, the bodyguards that Fu Jun found for Yang Yi might be from the company's security department, but Yang Yi could tell that they were pretty skilled. They should be retired soldiers that were recruited in the past 2 years. Yang Yi knew that Fu Jun's family had some official background. The company's actions of settling veterans, which originally only existed in state-owned enterprises and government units, should have a certain connection with Fu Jun's background. But that wasn't a big deal. Yang Yi was more than happy to see those retired soldiers finding jobs that they could handle. But he had gone too far. When Yang Yi's group entered the shopping mall, it caused quite a commotion. Many fans came over excitedly. Even if the bodyguard stopped them, they still took out their phones to take photos while shouting at Yang Yi. Yang Yi, I love you. Your Mo Fei's new song is so good. Fortunately, they were prepared. The fans in Yangqing City were more fanatical than those in Rivertown. Furthermore, celebrities often came here, so they had developed discerning eyes. Thus, they instantly recognized Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't ignore them. He covered Tong Tong's face and smiled at the fans. Thank you. Everyone, please be careful. Don't squeeze or get squeezed. Also, if you're taking photos, please turn off the flash. There are children around, so please be understanding. Understood, understood. The fans were still very good. They smiled and nodded. Some of them even put away their phones. Yang Yi, do you know that Mo Fei's new album has accumulated sales of more than 20 million and won the title of Platinum Album? A fan raised her phone and said excitedly, "This is too fast." The internet says that she broke the record. Yang Yi was stunned for a moment before he said, "Really? Really?" A lot of people laughed and echoed. The news was just released by the copyright organization. The good news came too suddenly. I only heard about it from you guys. Thank you for your support. I believe that all of you have bought the album, right? Yang Yi said with a smile. We bought it. A lot of fans shouted. We didn't buy it. We were late a few times, but it was always sold out. Some fans also shouted. However, Yang Yi didn't continue to talk to them. As they talked, they walked. Soon, they arrived at the doll store that Shishi wanted to visit. This doll store was much bigger than the one in Rivertown's Haihong shopping mall. It was almost the size of a small shopping mall. Thank you everyone. Let's call it a day. I still have to go shopping with Tong Tong. Don't disturb other people's businesses. It's the end of the year, and everyone needs to earn money for the new year. Go back and be careful. Yang Yi said gently as he held Tong Tong with one hand and shook her with the other. With so many people around, it seemed a little dangerous. The timid Cece followed her father closely. Even when her father let go of her hand in order to shake her hand, the little girl still tugged at her father's clothes and hid behind his legs, consciously avoiding the cameras that were taking pictures of her. However, she still felt quite safe with her father by her side. Therefore, she looked at her father and waved her little hand with him, saying goodbye to those sisters. Suddenly, a lot of people were attracted by the scene of Shishi hiding behind her father's legs and waving goodbye. Compared to Tong Tong hiding in her father's arms with her face covered, the cute Shishi was more popular. Oh, Shishi is so funny. Shishi, look here. I like you. Shishi, you know how to dance. Dance for me. The fans made a big fuss one after another. However, these did not affect Shishi, because Yang Yi had already brought her into the store. The bodyguards formed a large protective circle around them. The owner of the doll store was overjoyed. He asked his men to block the fans outside and temporarily close the store to entertain Yang Yi and his two children. This kind of opportunity to have a celebrity patronize the store was hard to come by. Although he would lose some money if he closed the store, after Yang Yi left, there would definitely be a lot of people coming to the store. The profit he could make was much more than the loss. Finally, there was no crowd. Shishi could finally choose her dolls happily. Tong Tong could not stay still. He struggled to get his father to put him down and walk. Sister. As soon as the little guy landed on the ground, he woke up from his dazed state. His face was full of excitement as he took small, quick steps to catch up with his sister. Shishi's attention was focused on the dazzling lineup of dolls on the shelves. How could she have the time to play with Tong Tong? However, Tong Tong felt that his sister was playing a game of catch-up with him. He giggled and threw himself on his sister's legs. Hey! Tong Tong hugged his sister's legs and let out a happy cry. However, Shishi only looked at him and ignored him. Instead, the little girl pointed at the dolls with slender limbs that could hang down from the shelves. She said to her father with interest, Papa, I want to see this little tiger and this pink. I don't know what it is. The little girl could not reach it and needed her father's help. However, before Yang Yi could reach out his hand, the shop assistant who was waiting at the side hurriedly went over and helped to take them down. Moreover, she kept taking them down as if she couldn't wait to take down all the dolls for Cece to see. She was stunned for a moment. She took the dolls in a daze. She thought that her father would take them. After a while, she finally reacted and said softly, "Thank you, sister. This pink one should be a leopard." Yang Yi identified it and said to Shishi, "Look at the t-shirt it's wearing. It has the words Pink Panther on it. It means a pink leopard." It was Shishi's first time seeing such a style of doll. Its legs and arms were very long and soft. It could be twisted into various positions. Among them, Shishi liked the pink leopard doll more. After all, it was pink and filled with the heart of a young girl. What's more, this leopard did not look like a leopard at all. Its cartoonish appearance also looked very cute. Yang Yi looked at Shishi choosing. He knew that Shishi had brought a lot of money this time. Yesterday, she had said that she had 10 gold coins and could buy 3 dolls. This time, are you still going to buy toys for your brother? Yang Yi asked Shishi with a smile. If you spend all of it, you can buy 3 dolls. Yang Yi did not intend to exploit Shishi's gold coins this time. He only gave the little girl a small test. Later, he also prepared a big reversal for Shishi. However, Cece didn't even raise her head as she said, "No. This time, I can't buy toys for my brother. I don't have enough." "Why?" Yang Yi asked with some surprise. In his impression, Shishi was not such a stingy child. Chapter 952. Yang Yi only wanted to tease Shishi and see if she would consider giving her younger brother a toy. However, Yang Yi did not expect that the little girl would reject her father's suggestion without even thinking about it. She was unwilling to share the purchasing power of 3 dolls with her younger brother. Was this still the kind-hearted little girl that Yang Yi liked? Why can't you share one with your younger brother? You can buy 3 dolls. Why isn't it enough? Yang Yi asked in surprise. Shishi was immersed in choosing different dolls. She did not even raise her head as she replied to her father's question. Because I already told little you, or an Xian heir, that I was going to bring them gifts. So that's why." Yang Yi instantly breathed a sigh of relief. Shishi still wanted to share, but she did not share them with her younger brother. Yang Yi glanced at Tong Tong, who was still imitating his older sister, and using his little hands to grab the shelf. Yang Yi sighed in his heart. "You're still smiling foolishly. Your older sister has already abandoned you." Shishi finally turned her head. She was holding the pink leopard in one hand and a cute crocodile with short legs in the other. She pouted her little mouth and said to her father, "Papa, look at these 2 dolls. They're so beautiful. I don't even know how to buy them." "Why don't you just buy one of each?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. But I don't know which one to choose." Shishi hugged the 2 dolls in front of her and said reluctantly, "I like both of them very much." However, before Yang Yi could give her an idea, the little girl had her eyes on a lamb doll on another shelf in the distance. This lamb doll was quite famous in Yangcheng in this world. It was said that it was originally designed to be the mascot of a football team in the city. To be chosen by Shishi among the thousands of dolls, it had its own uniqueness. The realistic design was, to a certain extent, more likable than the cartoon version. It was as white as milk, soft and smooth to the touch, had big round eyes, and had a slightly curved head. Even an adult like Yang Yi was attracted to this little toy, let alone Shishi. "I like this one too," Shishi said excitedly and awkwardly as she stroked the lamb's fur. Little Momo couldn't keep up with his sister's pace. He stepped on his little shoes and walked forward. Although there was still a smile on his little face, he was very anxious to keep up with his sister. He wished he could fly and catch up with his sister in an instant. Then he could also touch his sister's little lamb. However, Tong Tong's calves were too short and small. In his anxiety, he tripped over his feet and fell to the ground. Fortunately, Yang Yi's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He bent down and reached out to grab little Wanwan, preventing him from falling and crying out loud. After the crisis was resolved, little Momo was not frightened. It seemed that as long as the little fellow did not hurt from the fall, he would not take it to heart. After being put down by his father, little Momo giggled. and continued to run to find his sister to play. He did not look like a person who had almost fallen. There were more and more beautiful dolls, and she was a little overwhelmed. How should she choose? The little girl looked left and right and was in a dilemma. Are you going to buy one for yourself? Yang Yi asked with a smile. Aren't you going to buy gifts for Xi and Air, Fishy, and your sister Xiaowei? Sister Xiaowei? She looked at her father in confusion. But I didn't tell Sister Xiaowei. However, her father reminded her. The little girl muttered to herself. Oh right, I have to buy gifts for Sister Xiaowei. Sister Xiaowei said that she doesn't have any dolls at home. But then I won't have any dolls. She frowned worriedly. What should she do? How could Yang Yi bear to see her worry? He already had a backup plan. Yang Yi smiled and patted Shishi's head. He said, well, it's a good thing that you want to buy gifts for your good friends. Dad supports you. You don't have to spend the gold coins that you have painstakingly saved to buy dolls for them. Dad will pay for it for you. Really? Cece's eyes were wide open as she asked in surprise. Yes, but only this time. Yang Yi said with a smile. In the future, if you want to buy dolls, you still have to use gold coins to exchange for them. Yang Yi didn't do it on the spur of the moment. When he tested Shishi just now, he thought that if Shishi was willing to buy dolls for her brother, he would exempt Shishi from the gold coins needed to buy dolls for her brother. He couldn't always bully an honest person, right? Shishi didn't know what her father was thinking. She only felt that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. She could buy gifts for her good friends, and she could also choose dolls that she liked. At this moment, the little girl only felt that she was the happiest little girl in the world. She smiled sweetly, put down the little sheep doll, ran over and gave her father a big hug. Hee, Papa, you are so good. She finally picked 6 dolls. In addition to the previous ones, she also picked a monkey doll with long legs. Papa, can I have another little monkey? I also like this. The little girl looked at her father and begged. People's desires were always endless, and Shishi's love for dolls was the same. Moreover, when she saw that her father was so easy to talk to and generous today, she had a little idea. She wanted her father to be more generous and let her have more dolls. Unfortunately, her father saw through her little idea. We bought enough dolls today. We can't move the whole shop back, right? Yang Yi said with a smile. Next time, when you have enough gold coins, we will come to Yangcheng with Mom. Shishi was still a little reluctant, but she didn't make a fuss. She had picked so many dolls today and was satisfied. Moreover, before she gave 3 of the dolls to her friends, these dolls still belonged to her. On the way back to the hotel, Yang Yi sat in the back seat to accompany Shishi and Tong Tong because there was a chauffeur. He suddenly remembered something. Shishi, did you forget to buy a toy for your little brother? We bought presents for your friends, but your little brother has been with you for the whole morning. Did you not buy him a toy? Tong Tong was a little tired from playing and was about to fall asleep in the car. His eyelids were drooping and he didn't want to continue arguing with his sister. However, he didn't know that he was ignored by his sister and father. They didn't buy him a toy. Shishi blinked her big eyes. She took out the little monkey doll that she replaced last. She put the palm-sized, long-legged monkey into her little brother's arms. Little Momo felt the movement and opened his eyes to take a look. He liked this soft toy very much and immediately hugged it happily. Give this to your little brother. Shishi said generously. Didn't her little brother's doll also belong to her sister? Chapter 953. Murphy achieved the title of Platinum Album in less than a week. This result did not cause too much fluctuation in the hearts of Yang Yi and Murphy, but it was so dazzling that the entire entertainment industry could not ignore it. First of all, Murphy's speed of achieving Platinum Album undoubtedly broke the record in the Chinese music industry. Before Murphy, this record was set by the god of songs, Heavenly King Qi, in the last century before the popularity of the internet. However, the legendary record of the God of Songs reached 20 million sales 2 weeks and 3 days after it was released. Although there were still people who questioned Murphy's record with excuses such as the rise of the population and the increase of resident spending power, no one would doubt the excellence of Murphy's record. That afternoon, The entertainment media on the internet had already started the first round of revelry, with all kinds of reports coming in. Platinum album came so easily. Murphy's new record aims to be crowned a god. Too crazy, really broke through platinum sales in less than a week. You have to listen to this record. Unbelievable. The distributor is stupid, still broke the record and got platinum album. What will happen if you can't buy the new record in the music store? Murphy. Then you'll have to wait 2 days to break the record. Forget the results. Let's re-examine what we want to say. This title was clickbait, and the end was full of praise for the record. The reason why we want to say it is successful. If you can do this, you can also become a god like Murphy. It was still clickbait. The reason for the success was only 12 super excellent songs, and Murphy's level of singing. Obviously, it was almost impossible to achieve this. Not many companies could collect 12 such top-notch songs. Even if there were so many songs, they were reluctant to put so many eggs in one basket. If they were cut and used as the lead songs for 12 singers, how many people would they make famous? With such a crazy record, almost all the media thought that Murphy would completely establish her unique position in the Chinese music industry with this record. Murphy used to be known as the Queen of Songs by the media. When she was young, she had been touted as the Queen of Songs and the Queen of Ice Mountain songs by the media because of her song, Same Ink Road. Of course, Niu Miling also played a part in the hype behind this. And after her last record in Tianmei, First Dream, achieved great success, the media also brought up the matter again. They felt that Murphy indeed deserved to be crowned as the Queen of Songs with her excellent singing skills and so many achievements. But even so, Murphy's divinity was still unstable. She had retired or semi-retired after giving birth twice, causing the popularity she had accumulated to dwindle. Later, the media even mocked her for relying on her daughter's cuteness to gain attention. Who would be willing to call a singer who had not been seen for years and whose concerts they could not watch, the song Empress? But now no one could deny Murphy's results. She had already broken the record of the God of Songs. Did she not have the ability to be crowned as a heavenly queen? In addition to the heated discussion in the media, many music critics who had not done anything before also rushed to share their views on Murphy's record. It was almost a one-sided 5-star review. It couldn't be helped. 12 songs, 13 to be exact, each of which was a masterpiece at the level of a hit song. No one dared to deny its excellence. Of course, there were also people who, in order to create a gimmick and attract others' attention, abruptly gave the record a 1-star negative review. He attacked the point that Yang Yi and Murphy deliberately acted pitiful. From recent news reports, it can be seen that the relationship between Yang Yi and Murphy is still very good. Obviously, they deliberately wrote and sang sad songs. This is not a record with real feelings. It's so fake that it's disgusting. In that case, it seemed to make some sense. However, the comments below still revealed the truth. XXX, you XXX are dead. Such boring abuse was ignored for the time being. After all, the number of fans who paid attention to Murphy and Yang Yi had increased a lot because of this album. There would also be some fans who were easily angry and easy to get angry. In fact, it was easy to attract criticism. There were still a lot of reasonable comments. Why must one put in real feelings to say that it's a good record? What makes a good song? Don't tell me that those movie stars who won our applause have to have the same tragic life experience as their characters? Whether Murphy put in real feelings or not, it's not up to you to say. Anyway, I cried several times when I listened to it. Every time, it brought back memories of the past. Such songs are good songs. Even if you don't like these songs, this record shouldn't only be given a 1-star negative review. You're just criticizing for the sake of criticizing. I suggest that brothers unfollow this music critic, and the Music Review Association revoke this person's qualifications as a music critic. Of course, ignoring these clowns, many music critics were still willing to give a fair evaluation. Of course, it was still a 5-star review. And many music critics also analyzed the reasons for the success of Murphy's record. Some gave high praise to Murphy's singing, while others sighed with emotion about Yang Yi's creative ability. It was worth mentioning that there were still some doubts about Yang Yi's creative ability in the industry. Although many record companies didn't have the opportunity to cooperate with Yang Yi, Many well-known composers and lyricists were unwilling to recognize Yang Yi's status. They felt that Yang Yi was too young and didn't have many works to prove his strength. But this time, riding on Murphy's fame, Yang Yi once again walked into the eyes of the people all over the country. Yang Yi's products must be the best. Perhaps he could really set up a real brand. Micro-broadcasting. Many stars sent micro-broadcasts to congratulate Murphy on breaking the record. Not only Chen Yijie, Luo Xian, Jie Yuchen, Dan Hongkui, Yuan Yan, Zhu Jie, and other good friends in the industry sincerely congratulated Murphy, but there were also many singers with a certain competitive relationship who sent congratulatory messages in order to ride on the popularity. Just like Li Man, although her heart was sour and full of envy, jealousy, and hatred, she still pretended to follow the crowd and sent a congratulatory micro-broadcast. If Murphy only got a platinum record, others would still be jealous. But now that she got such a brilliant result, no singer would dare to make irresponsible remarks. Just like Yang Yi's previous life's god Zhangge, after he became a god, even the best of the new generation had to respectfully call him idol. In the face of other people's absolutely crushing results, the small singers who didn't have any good results yet had better be honest. Li Man was the same. Although she was envious, jealous, and hateful, and although her heart was a little twisted, she didn't dare to scold Murphy at the moment. She could only secretly collect negative materials about Yang Yi and Murphy. Then again, Li Man really couldn't do anything about Yang Yi and Murphy. These two people were too low-key, and she couldn't find any negative materials at all. She couldn't say that they didn't like to participate in programs, and were always hypocritically showing affection, right? Many gossip media often praised Yang Yi and Murphy for being low-key and down-to-earth. These were not negative points, but Yang Yi and Murphy attracted too many true fans. As for the issue of showing affection, this was even more difficult to complain about. It must be known that Yang Yi and Murphy rarely showed affection in front of reporters, unlike Li Man and her fake husband Do Zoon, who deliberately showed affection in front of the camera. Yang Yi and Murphy even rarely appeared in front of reporters hand in hand. In such a situation, even some brainless gossip reporters suspected that their marriage existed in name only. But there was more evidence to prove that Yang Yi and Murphy's relationship was still very good. For example, Zhuozi once did a gossip analysis. From the details of the airport photos and secret photos, they circled the evidence of Yang Yi and Murphy's love. For example, Yang Yi showed care and consideration for Murphy in some subtle aspects. For example, in every photo of Murphy looking at Yang Yi, you could read Murphy's admiration and love for Yang Yi. They didn't show affection, but as Yang Yi said in an interview with Luo Xian before, love isn't shown, it's the hard work of two people. Of course, the intention of Zhuozi in this gossip analysis was not to say how much Yang Yi and Murphy loved each other, but to use Yang Yi and Murphy as a positive example, to attack Li Man and Do Zoon as a negative example. Who asked Li Man to take on so many gossip points? In any case, Murphy's fans finally held their heads high. Although Murphy didn't update the micro-broadcast, the studio only sent a micro-broadcast to introduce Murphy's award. They also flocked to the studio's micro-broadcast to celebrate. I knew it, Murphy, you won't let us down. Murphy will be crowned as a god in this battle. Who else dares to say that our sister Mo isn't powerful? Upstairs, Murphy has already been crowned as a god. She's the goddess in my heart. Funny. Now no one will doubt Murphy's strength, right? In addition to these comments, many fans excitedly called out, Murphy, hurry up and hold a concert. You can even hold a national tour concert. We guarantee that every concert will be full, and there won't be any empty seats left. Now that you're in charge, you must hold a few more concerts. We've been waiting for 2 years. Previously, the media got the news of Zhen Muqian being fired. Although it didn't cause a sensation, many fans still knew the real reason why Murphy left Tian Mei. They also knew that Tian Mei was indeed a bit stingy. They couldn't even bear to hold concerts in small and medium-sized cities. Of course, the fans still chose to forgive Tian Mei. Murphy didn't break up with Tian Mei. Moreover, Yang Yi's program still maintained cooperation with Tian Mei. Moreover, Zhu Jie was a celebrity that many people liked. Some people analyzed Murphy's emotional side. Wasn't this one of the reasons why many fans liked Murphy more? This cold-faced goddess was actually just cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. Chapter 954. After returning from Guangzhou, Xixi dance training began to increase. Even Saturdays and Sundays were packed to the brim. After all, the dance competition that she was going to participate in was going to start in 2 weeks' time. A young lady like her had to work hard to prepare for it. From the 11th to the 15th of December, Huijia Primary School had scheduled their art competition for this semester for that week. Every day, there would be different types of competitions for different grades. For example, Xixi's dance competition for the lower grades was scheduled for the afternoon of the 15th. It was also because they wanted to watch Xixi's performance that Yang Yi and Murphy pushed back all their schedules for that day, including China's The Voice's peak night. Of course, Yang Yi and Murphy did not let Xixi follow the teacher to prepare and participate in the competition by herself. As an outstanding member of Xixi's fan club, Yang Yi specially brought over teacher Xia Suqing's rearrangement of Seve and retouched it before handing it over to Xixi to practice. Teacher Xia's rearrangement of the dance song incorporated folk dances into it. However, it could only be said to be a stiff patchwork, a little like the random patchwork style of street dance. Yang Yi helped to make the transition part smoother and smoother. Even if it was a folk dance song, he also reworked it to make the rhythm and drums more prominent. This way, Xixi's dance would be more rhythmic and more enjoyable. Don't think that Yang Yi had only been using the excellent music works from his previous life. In fact, he had been constantly improving them. For example, he had listened to Jiang Chuan for a year. If he was asked to compose some simple music, it would not be a problem. And his ability to arrange music was improving day by day. He was no longer inferior to a normal music producer. In fact, during the production of Murphy's new album, Jin Yingming lamented that Yang Yi was about to steal his job. Therefore, reworking Xixi's dance song was a relatively easy task for Yang Yi. Murphy would also take some time to guide Xixi's dance. In fact, Murphy's teaching was more detailed than Xixi's dance teacher. As long as Murphy was home or on weekends, she would personally guide Xixi to dance. The little girl's training was still very good. Everyone was looking forward to her performance in the competition. On Tuesday, Xixi had her PE class with Yu Xiaowei again. When the teacher told them that they could only do activities, she skipped over to Yu Xiaowei. Behind her, Lu Xiaoyu and Lan Xian's feet. Sister Xiaowei, I have something to tell you. The little girl said cheerfully. Xixi. Yu Xiaowei stood there quietly. She still seemed a little out of place with her classmates. When she heard Xixi's voice, she smiled and turned to Xixi. In fact, Yu Xiaowei had made great progress in the past 2 months. Not only did she smile more often, but she also took the initiative to talk to her classmates. Of course, the change still needed a long process. Yu Xiaowei still didn't talk much. Her classmates' impression of her hadn't changed. Therefore, she still looked a little lonely. Sister Xiaowei, will you come to watch my competition? Xixi said, I'm going to dance on Friday and participate in a competition. Then my papa, mom, and my brother, Xi and Air, and little Yu, are all said that they want to watch me dance. Yes. We will all go and watch Xixi dance. Lu Xiaoyu nodded fiercely and followed Xixi's words. Lan Xian, on the other hand, had a new idea. She didn't know why, but she was very proud of herself. She raised her chin and said proudly, I'm not going to see Xixi dance. I want to see Xixi win the award. Xixi is very good at dancing. Hehe, I also want to win a prize. Xixi was amused by Lan Xian. Dancing? So good. Yu Xiaowei looked at Xixi with some envy and whispered. Yu Xiaowei was very introverted. She didn't participate in sports activities since she was a child, let alone such an intense event like dancing. Therefore, when she heard that Xixi was going to participate in a dance competition, she inexplicably admired her. Sister Xiaowei is also very good. Xixi had a good memory and said. Teacher Lai also said that Sister Xiaowei participated in the recitation competition and won the second prize. Second prize? Lu Xiaoyu cried out in surprise. Wow, Sister Xiaowei, can I touch your trophy? Yu Xiaowei was somewhat embarrassed and shyly said, "But my trophy is not a trophy, it's a certificate. I left it at home." Certificate? Okay. Lu Xiaoyu suddenly lost interest. "Sister Xiaowei, can you also come and watch my competition?" Shishi didn't forget her question, and asked again. Yu Xiaowei nodded and gave a concise response. "That's great." Shishi happily clapped her hands and happily said, "I also want to call Chen Shiyun and Chi-Chi." "Aren't you called Nan Jiaoyu?" Lu Xiaoyu nearby checked for omissions. "I called him," Shishi said with a grin. "Actually, Nan Jiaoyu called me first. He also wants to participate in the competition." "What competition will Nan Jiaoyu participate in?" Lu Xiaoyu curiously asked. "He will participate in a singing competition." Lan Xian rushed to answer. "Yes, Nan Jiaoyu will have a competition on Thursday. I will go and watch his competition, and then he will also come and watch my competition on Friday." Shishi counted with her little fingers and excitedly said. So there was such a small deal. However, Shishi hasn't finished her story. The little girl giggled and said, "I forgot to invite Sister Xiaowei and Chen Shiyun. If Nan Jiaoyu didn't tell me, I wouldn't have remembered. But I will definitely go and watch you dance." Lu Xiaoyu patted her chest righteously. When Shishi was calling her friends, Yang Yi didn't know about it. However, like father like daughter, Yang Yi couldn't help but call Yang Huan, Guazi, Ding Xiang and the others and ask them to come and cheer Shishi on Friday night if they were free. Originally, Yang Yi didn't want to make it so public. He was afraid that he would create a group of friends and relatives, which would put too much pressure on Shishi. However, looking at Shishi's performance during training, the little girl danced really well. According to the teacher, she might even win a prize. Yang Yi's little idea started to swell. "We have such an excellent Shishi in our family. It's her first time participating in a competition, and her first time winning a prize. How can we not let more people witness this special moment?" Yang Yi was a little excited just thinking about it. So he secretly organized it. Except for Mo Xiaowan, who was really busy that day, because Murphy had quit work, she had to help Murphy receive the year-end award from a music website. Yang Huan and the others all agreed to come and support Shishi. However, Yang Yi didn't plan to tell Shishi about it. Just as he was worried before, in order not to put too much pressure on Shishi, Yang Yi's support group wouldn't show up before Shishi's competition. They would only secretly go to the small auditorium where the competition was held, and wait for Shishi to finish her performance. Then, they would suddenly appear to give Shishi a surprise and praise her. Yang Yi planned all of this perfectly. Yang even came up with some plans. For example, if Shishi didn't dance well and didn't win a prize, the little girl would be depressed. He would let Yang Huan and the others watch and then secretly go back. He would accompany Shishi and comfort her. Of course, Yang Yi also informed Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue, who were far away in Anqing. Unfortunately, the village was busy with a passing ceremony, and the old man was too busy to leave. Chapter 955. December 15th. The day was coming soon. For the fans of China's Voice, they had been looking forward to this night for a long time. A month ago, various versions of the names of the contestants who would make it to the night had been circulating. Of course, last week, the final battle of the champions had ended and the semi-finalists had been announced. But the strongest contestants from each of the 4 coaches would enter the final battle to determine the champion. Tonight's show was obviously going to be the most crucial, the most intense, and the most exciting. Not to mention the audience who were prepared to stay at home. On the afternoon of the 15th, there was already a long queue outside the 100,000-seat Beijing Stadium. Countless fans who had managed to snag tickets had rushed over from all over the country, just to watch this music festival live. The venue was already in full swing. Meanwhile, at Huijia Primary School in Jiangqing's Wuhu district, the school grounds were also very lively in the afternoon. After the second period, many parents and friends who had been waiting outside the school grounds rushed into the school grounds. Some of them went to the small auditorium of the art museum early to reserve seats, while others searched the school grounds for their children who were about to participate in the competition to give their last words of encouragement. Yang-yi was the latter. He brought his friends to the second floor of the auditorium to find their seats, while he brought Murphy to the classroom where Shishi had taken her dance lessons to see Shishi. The little girl had already changed into a light white dance dress with blue spots. Of course, before going on stage, she also wore a thick coat. The school had also considered the health of the children, so the stage in the auditorium was equipped with a heater, so Shishi could take off her coat before going on stage. Teacher Xia Suqing was also putting on eye makeup for her. She applied some blue eyeshadow on the corners of her eyes and eyelids. The little girl was already a natural beauty, so after applying some light makeup, she became even more beautiful. There was also a kind of playful charm to her. Of course, this was only necessary for Shishi's dance. Shishi couldn't sit still. Just now, the teacher had applied light red lip gloss for her, so she couldn't speak. The little girl was almost suffocating. Now that her father and mother had arrived, Sisi didn't even bother to respond to her father's praise. She couldn't wait to say to her father, "Papa, can you help me go and see if Chi-Chi and Shiryun have arrived? There are so many people outside. How can Daddy help you?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "It's okay. They promised to come and cheer for you, so they will definitely come. At that time, you just have to dance well on the stage. They can see it. You have such a small audience." Murphy stood beside the dressing table with Tong Tong in her arms and teased Shishi with a smile. "Today, you must be the one with the most fans among all the children who participated in the competition, right?" Was there even a need to ask? As for Shishi's fans, just look at Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting account, and the number of people calling him father-in-law every day. Even if Yang Yi did not post much about Shishi recently, those bastards still came to Yang Yi all day long to make fun of him. However, the fans that Murphy was referring to were obviously not those virtual fans. Murphy was referring to the relatives and friends who came to cheer for Shishi today. After Xia Suqing finished the last stroke of Shishi's eyebrow makeup, she tactfully excused herself to go to the bathroom, giving Shishi some space to be with her family for a while. After the teacher left, Shishi did not have so many worries. The little girl excitedly jumped down from the dressing table, pinched the skirt with blue eyes, and playfully raised one foot to show off to her mom. She asked expectantly, "Mom, look. Am I beautiful?" She was too embarrassed to ask just now. She felt embarrassed to say so. "Beautiful," Murphy said with a smile. Our Shishi has become a beautiful little peacock. Shishi was satisfied. She giggled, pinched both sides of her skirt, and shook her little butt. Yang Yi noticed that Tong Tong, who was in Murphy's arms, had been staring at his sister with his big round eyes. The little guy was not nearsighted. Yang Yi guessed that he was staring at Shishi because he could not react to her current appearance. "What's wrong?" Yang Yi reached out his hand and rubbed Tong Tong's head. He asked with a smile, "Can't you recognize your sister?" When Shishi heard her father's words, she excitedly jumped in front of her mother. She made a face at Tong Tong and giggled. No one expected that Tong Tong would be frightened by the green-faced and fanged Shishi. The little guy hurriedly turned his head and grabbed his mother's collar. He could not help but look at his mother and point at Shishi. He did not dare to turn his head and said, Why is this person so scary? This is my elder sister." Mo Fei explained with a smile. However, little Swanny still had a scared expression on his face. He pointed at Cece and pouted his little mouth as he complained, "Big sister." "Yes, sister, but she is still very scary." Yang Yi and Murphy finally understood that Tong Tong was not used to his sister with makeup. Moreover, she looked like a peacock. They did not know whether to laugh or cry. They comforted Tong Tong for a while, and even allowed him to observe Shishi closely. Only then did he reluctantly accept his sister's current appearance. Even so, the little guy only dared to sneak a peek at his sister, and did not dare to look at her for too long. "Little brother thinks I'm not pretty." Shishi watched her parents comforting Tong Tong. She gently pouted her little mouth and pulled her father's hand. She said unhappily, "Why? I think the little peacock is quite cute. Because little brother hasn't seen you dance yet. When he sees you dance in this dress, he will know how beautiful you are." Yang Yi had no choice but to comfort Shishi. This couldn't be helped. After all, little Momo was still young. His ability to accept some changes in life was still weak. Fortunately, someone came to the rescue. The little friends that Shishi was talking about just now rushed into the classroom under the lead of Yang Luoqi, who was also in dance class. Shishi, I finally see you. I've been looking for you for a long time. Chen Shiyun's excited voice could be heard even before they entered the classroom. I'm the one who found you. I knew Shishi must be here. Yang Luoqi's little face was a little red from the cold outside. Although her voice was very soft, she could not wait to claim credit from Shishi. Hee, you're all here. Shishi's lack of confidence was swept away. She happily gathered with the other children and held their hands as they jumped and danced. Wow, Shishi, you're so beautiful in this dress. Nan Xiaoyu looked at Shishi enviously and said, You're wearing such a beautiful dress. You'll definitely win an award. Nan Xiaoyu was very depressed that he did not win an award in the singing competition yesterday. Now he found an excuse for himself. It must be because he did not wear a beautiful dress yesterday. Really? But my brother doesn't think it's beautiful. Shishi blinked her big eyes and asked happily. She still wanted to seek the affirmation of her friends. Yes. It's so beautiful. Lu Xiaoyu and the other children all responded. They would not let Shishi down. Even Yu Xiaowei nodded and said enviously in a low voice, I also think it's beautiful. Shishi, where did you buy this dress? I also want my father to buy it for me. It's so beautiful. It's just like a peacock. Lan Xian asked very seriously. She did not care whether she could wear it, or whether there was a huge difference between a buyer's show and a model's show. Hee, it's little peacock. Cece bounced up and down and replied cheerfully. Chapter 956. How exciting could a primary school dance competition be? Needless to say, even if Huijia Primary School's students were of high quality and they were interested in learning, there was still a limit to how exciting it could be. It definitely couldn't be compared to the Spring Festival Gala's peak night of China's Voice. However, Yang Yi and Murphy did not regret missing out on the peak night. They stood in front of the crowd on the left side of the first floor, watching the performance on stage with great interest. There was no other choice. This was a dance competition for the lower grades, and there were children from 3 grades participating. Apart from the teachers and students who came to watch, there were also a lot of relatives and friends of the participating children. Huijia Primary School's small auditorium was considered a very big performance hall. The auditorium was divided into 2 levels, but there were still too many people in the audience. Not to mention Yang Yi who came later. Even Yang Huan and Ding Xiang did not manage to get a seat. They also stood at the back of the second floor to watch. Yang Yi and Murphy were civilized people. They would not use their celebrity status to make a scene, and insist on getting a seat. Therefore, they stood in the aisle on both sides like the other parents. At this time, Yang Yi and Murphy were just like a normal pair of parents. They stood in the middle of the crowd and no one recognized that Murphy was the newly crowned heavenly queen who was famous all over China. Look at him. You can't even take your eyes off him. Murphy, who was leaning on Yang Yi's broad chest, suddenly poked Yang Yi's arm gently. She smiled and pointed at Tong Tong, who was in Yang Yi's arms, and said to Yang Yi, because they had to stand in the crowd and watch, Yang Yi was afraid that Murphy would be tired, so he carried Tong Tong over early on. At this time, when Yang Yi heard Murphy's voice, he looked down at Tong Tong and realized that the little rascal was indeed staring at the stage as Murphy had said. He didn't know if it was because of the bright lights on stage or because the young ladies dancing on stage were more attractive, but the little rascal was very engrossed in watching. Actually, the children performing on the stage didn't dance very well. She paled in comparison to Shishi. Of course, Yang Yi couldn't say these words in this crowded environment. He just smiled at Murphy and continued to look at the next contestant. Although in the eyes of Yang Yi and Murphy, these children's dance was very flawed, it was not bad. After all, they were all small, and their every move was adorable. Even if there was a mistake, the parents would just laugh softly and offer encouraging applause, even if it was not their own child. After some time, it was finally Shishi's turn. Next, let's invite the 17th contestant, Yangxi from the first grade, class 3. Her instructor, Xia Suqing, will be bringing us a creative dance, the spirit of the peacock. The little host girl should be a senior. She looked much taller and appeared to be calm and steady. She announced in a clear voice. Yang Yi immediately became spirited. Murphy was also a little excited. She grabbed Yang Yi's right arm and called out softly, "It's coming, it's coming." This competition was really exciting. Murphy was very calm when she participated in all kinds of ranking shows, but now she couldn't calm down. She had already walked up the stage when the host announced. Under the bright stage lights, Shishi's little face was pale. Of course, this was only the effect of the lighting. Fortunately, the blue eyeshadow at the corners of her eyes could mitigate the impact of this color. At least, it made Shishi's delicate little face look more three-dimensional. When Shishi went up on stage, the audience below the stage was talking. Yang Yi could hear the curious discussions of the parents around him. Of course, others were not talking about how beautiful Shishi was. On the stage, the lights shone on the children and made them look similar. Wow, is this a first-grade child? She's so tall? Someone couldn't help but click his tongue. If the host didn't say it, I would have thought that she was a third-grade student. A first-grade child is actually so tall. This was a comparison between Shishi and her peers. Yeah, children nowadays can keep up with the nutritional conditions, and they look much better than children of our era. Some people also compared Sisi to their childhood memories. Yang Yi blended into the crowd and the corners of his mouth curled up proudly. However, after thinking about it, he still chose to keep a low profile. At this moment, the melody of the music started. Shishi's performance had already begun. The little girl was actually very nervous. Just like when she and her classmates were performing in a play, the little girl's little face was tense, and she didn't dare to look at the situation below the stage. However, she knew that her parents were watching from below the stage. Her friends were also supporting her. She didn't need to look to know that a wave of courage had already gathered. The music at the beginning was very melodious. In the middle, there was a faint sound of gored silk floating in the air. Shishi also followed the accompaniment and danced the peacock dance. The peacock dance that Shishi learned was a relatively simple beginner movement. However, with the beautiful peacock feather dress as a foil, the little girl danced along with the music. She looked very much like a mischievous little peacock jumping around in the bamboo forest. This description wasn't wrong. Shishi couldn't dance with the elegance and grace of a peacock like a dancer. However, with her small body twisting and turning, she danced with a lively rhythm. Of course, how good Shishi's performance was depended on how it was compared. If she were to be compared to the dancers who specialized in the peacock dance, Shishi was still far behind. However, compared to the children in front of her, Shishi's performance was breathtaking. Yang Yi could hear the discussions of the surrounding audience. This child danced very well. She actually danced the peacock dance. Don't tell me she specialized in this? That's amazing. My favorite folk dance is the peacock dance. However, Yang Yi also heard Murphy muttering softly, "Steady, steady." The next twist is the main point. Murphy looked even more nervous than Shishi on the stage. The folk dance's rhythm quietly sped up. It integrated with the beat of the waist drum and slowly picked up speed. At a certain rhythm point, it smoothly switched to the Seve dance song. The audience didn't notice it until the familiar electronic sound rang out. Then they suddenly trembled with excitement. Wow! Amidst the praises and exclamations, the little girl in the peacock feather dress gently lifted the hem of her dress, revealing a small section of her calves and shoes. Then she began to dance briskly to the rhythm. At the beginning, she only danced like this. Later on, Shishi lowered the hem of her dress with one hand and gently lifted it with the other. As she danced, she used her free hand to make the signature movement of the peacock dance. Although dancing Seve in a dress didn't reflect the beauty of her long legs, Shishi had to appear lively. At this moment, the little girl on the stage was like a completely lively little peacock. It was as if something had made her happy all of a sudden. She jumped briskly in the bamboo forest, spreading a pleasant positive energy. It was too wonderful. Yang Yi couldn't help but want to praise his daughter's dancing. He realized that Shishi was really a talent who could improvise. The little girl's face was slightly tense and didn't reveal a smile. However, her performance didn't show any signs of nervousness. In fact, Yang Yi felt that Shishi was outperforming herself. Her performance was even better than when she was training. It was indeed too wonderful. The audience below the stage didn't expect to see such a wonderful performance in a dance competition for juniors. They didn't expect to see such a difficult dance like Seve. They exclaimed. Even many of the seated audience couldn't help but stand up. Chapter 957. When Shishi won the admiration of many audience members, Yang Yi deliberately lowered his head to look at Tong Tong because of the movement in his arms. The little boy was detached from the world and was not affected by his surroundings at all. However, he was still watching the stage with great interest as before. Moreover, it seemed that Cece's dance had influenced him. The little guy's little hands were waving and his little feet were unconsciously kicking. Looking at his beaming face, it seemed that he was also very fond of this program, and was even more interested in it than the previous ones. Yang Yi was a little confused. Was Tong Tong frightened by his sister just now? Why was he not afraid now? He decided to give it a try. Yang Yi gently lifted Tong Tong's little, but to attract his attention. Then he pointed at Shishi who was dancing on the stage and lowered his head to Tong Tong and whispered, "This is my sister." Tong Tong tilted his little head and looked at his father with a puzzled expression. He asked in a childish voice, "Sister?" Yang Yi smiled and nodded. He continued to point at Shishi and said, "Yes, this is your sister." Little Fuchen could still understand the gist of these simple words. He turned his head and continued to look at Cece on the stage. After a while, he turned his head back excitedly and waved his little hand. He mumbled to his father, "Sister, sister." The little boy seemed to be showing off to his father. "Look, sister is dancing. She's amazing." Yang Yi smiled. He felt that Tong Tong had forgotten that he was frightened by his sister's eye makeup. However, this was also good. As long as the little boy was happy, it was fine. Shishi's dance started with the peacock dance and ended with the peacock dance. After a fast rhythm, it gradually returned to the soothing accompaniment of the calabash silk. However, Murphy was watching very carefully. She softly exclaimed beside Yang Yi, "Oh, the beat is wrong." After Murphy's reminder, Yang Yi noticed that Shishi was indeed a little unnatural in the transition. The beat had obviously slowed down, but the little girl still danced a little faster. Because of this, the later movements and the music were a little out of sync. What should I do? Yang Yi saw that Shishi was stunned on the stage for about 10 seconds. Then in a panic, she followed the new music and danced a new move. This mistake was not only noticed by Yang Yi, but also by the audience who did not know how to dance. A father knows his daughter best. Although Yang Yi was not by Cece's side, he could still feel the pain in the little fellow's heart. Although Shishi did not have obsessive-compulsive disorder, but she might have been influenced by her father, and was a little perfectionist. For her to make a mistake, and it was such an obvious mistake, the little girl must have been very upset. Otherwise, she would not have been stiff for more than 10 seconds. The audience below the stage gave an encouraging applause. There were even quite a number of people who shouted, "Come on! It's okay." Regardless of the other noises, Cece was still dancing very seriously towards the end. The little peacock perfectly acted out the final action of playing happily, slowly folding its wings and bending over to sleep on the stage. It had to be said that teacher Xia Suqing's choreography ability was quite good. This ending move was designed to move the hearts of the audience. Good. The audience below the stage gave Shishi a very loud applause and cheers. Even the leaders and teachers in the front row of judges stood up to applaud Shishi. Although Shishi made a mistake, the flaws could not obscure the beauty of the little girl. The little girl's wonderful dance still made everyone's eyes light up. The audience's enthusiastic cheers were the best praise for the little girl. Murphy also clapped her hands excitedly. She was not as harsh as she was when she watched the performance. At this moment, she was sincerely proud of her daughter. Not only that, she even turned around with a smile and held Tong Tong's little hand. She patted it lightly and encouraged him. Come, clap your hands, clap for your sister. Little Tianyi might not have understood his mother's purpose, or he might have just thought that his mother was playing with him, but he still happily giggled. Looking at his mother, he clapped his fleshy little hands with all his might. She's your child. At this moment, a female parent heard Murphy's words and came over curiously to ask. Yes. Murphy nodded proudly and smiled. She's our eldest daughter. Oh. The female parent struck up a conversation with an ulterior motive. She smiled and praised. Your child is so outstanding. Her dance is so beautiful. Did you specially learn to dance before? I haven't learned it before, but I used to dance with me for fun. Later, after I came to school, I started to attend the interest class. Only then did I have a professional teacher to guide me. The corners of Mo Fei's mouth curled up, and she waved her hand, pretending that she didn't care. That's amazing. I signed my daughter up for a dance class, but she's so stupid. She can't even dance. The female parent said enviously. Oh right. What do you usually feed your child? She's so tall. She's only in first grade, but she's almost as tall as our Xiaoya. Our Xiaoya isn't even as tall as her in third grade. She doesn't eat much. She usually eats at home. She prefers her father's cooking. Murphy smiled and pointed at Yang Yi, who was holding Tong Tong. Yang Yi also smiled and nodded at the other party. No, what I mean is, did you add any nutrients to the child? The mother tirelessly asked Yang Yi and the others. Their conversation attracted the attention of the surrounding parents. Many of them either pricked up their ears to eavesdrop or, like a younger mother, excitedly interrupted. That's right. What does your child eat to grow so tall? I heard that the milk that the child usually drinks is very important. I even asked my husband's sister to buy milk powder for the child in Australia. What brand of milk powder do you give the child? If he had to talk to these parents about parenting, there would be no end to it. Murphy wasn't good at socializing. Faced with their questions, she couldn't handle it. Actually, we didn't buy any special milk powder. We drank. Murphy reluctantly answered a few words. She then used Yang Yi to pick up Shishi. They squeezed through the crowd and walked backstage. Walking on the path backstage, Murphy heaved a sigh of relief and lamented. It's too scary. It's even scarier than those fans. Yang Yi laughed and shook his head gently. Actually, those parents still had some use for Yang Yi. Yang Yi might say something, but who would want to discuss parenting with a male parent? Murphy, who didn't occupy a leading position in family education and life, received more attention. She was surrounded and supported by those parents as a celebrity. However, it was also interesting that Murphy was still not recognized by anyone. But it was understandable. In the child's school, everyone was very concerned about the child's situation. Why would they think that an ordinary parent next to them would be a celebrity? Moreover, the parents whose children were in primary school were basically past the age of chasing celebrities. Every day, they were tortured by these little rascals until they were exhausted. They also had to explain to them questions and teach them to do homework. How would they have the energy to pay attention to the entertainment industry? If Murphy and Yang Yi were to act in some soap operas, perhaps these parents would recognize them. Yang Yi and Murphy went backstage and saw Shishi, who was being led off the stage by teacher Xia Suqing. The little girl was indeed still upset. When she saw her father, she ran over with tears in her eyes. She hugged her father's waist and buried her head in her father's embrace. Chapter 958. Seeing Shishi's sad expression, Murphy took Tong Tong from Yang Yi's arms so that Yang Yi could free up his hands to comfort Shishi. Yang Yi first pulled away Shishi's hands from his waist. The previous chapter said that Shishi hugged the thighs because Yang Yi didn't think about it, and it had been revised according to the suggestions of the readers. He squatted down and put his big hands on both sides of Shishi's body, half hugging the little girl. Shishi pursed her little mouth and was so sad that she didn't want to say anything. After her father squatted down, she took a step forward, hugged her father's neck, and buried her little head in it. Why are you so sad? Do you think you didn't dance well? Yang Yi asked softly. Shishi gently raised her head and looked into her father's eyes. She blinked her big teary eyes hard, and 2 sparkling teardrops suddenly fell from her long eyelashes. Then she nodded sadly. What? Dad thinks you dance very well. Yang smiled and said, look, after you finished dancing, didn't many teachers and students stand up and applaud you? Teacher Xia Suqing smiled bitterly. She had actually used this to comfort Shishi just now, but the effect was not obvious. Sure enough, the little girl still found it difficult to let go. She lowered her little head unhappily and whispered, I didn't dance right. I stopped. It was so ugly. No, it's just a small mistake. In fact, your performance was very good. Yang Yi said softly, whether it was the front or the back, Dad thinks you dance very well. Although there was a small problem, no one can deny your efforts before. Mom also liked your dance very much, right? Mo Fei chimed in. Yes, Mom and Dad are watching from below. Do you know that everyone around you is praising you? Those parents all wish that you were their child. Shishi looked at her mother with some surprise. Yes, our teacher was watching backstage and said that you dance very well. This time, you definitely won't have a problem winning the award. Xia Suqing quickly said. Shishi blinked. Now that there were no tears falling, the little girl's mood seemed to have stabilized a little. However, Yang Yi did not intend to educate his child like this. He pulled Shishi to the side, found a stool, and let her sit down, while Yang Yi squatted down. Although Yang Yi could also sit, he still wanted to talk to Shishi on the same level. He didn't want Shi to feel that he was high above her. Let's not talk about the small mistake just now, okay? Don't you think you dance better than before? Yang Yi asked Sisi with a smile. Shishi's little mouth was still pouting, but after hesitating for a moment, she nodded gently. In fact, she also didn't dare to nod. Because although she felt that she danced well, with the psychological barrier just now, the little girl was a little uncertain. Dad told you, your dance is much better than before when you were training. Yang Yi said softly. Otherwise, when Mom and Dad saw you, why were they so happy, right? Shishi's pouting little mouth gradually returned to normal. The little girl's eyes turned, and it seemed that her mood had improved. She whispered, really? Yes, it's true. You know that Dad will never coax you. If you do well, it's good. If you do badly, Dad won't make you happy, right? Yang Yi smiled. Shishi's eyes revealed a trace of a happy smile, but she didn't laugh out loud. That small mistake just now caused the whole dance to be flawed, and the little girl was still brooding about it. But she was just a little tangled in her heart, and her mood had returned to normal. Shishi found that her father was squatting, and it was very difficult for him. She cutely stretched out her 2 hands, hugged one of her father's big hands, and pulled and said, Papa, you also sit down. It's okay, Dad still has one more thing to tell you. Yang Yi patted the little girl's little hand and continued to ask, what do you think is the purpose of our competition? It is a competition, and then we have to win. This question was a little profound for Shishi. The little girl thought for a while, and then said, yes, we are here to participate in the competition, but our purpose of participating in the competition is not necessarily to win. Yang Yi tidied Shishi's hair and said, although we are here to compete, it is best to defeat the opponent and get the reward. But if we can't get the reward, we can't say that our participation in the competition is meaningless. Dad doesn't want you to put too much emphasis on the concept of winning and losing. Why? Shishi asked in confusion. Because our life is very long. Winning or losing once doesn't mean that you will win or lose in the future. Just like the tortoise and the hare. Do you still remember the story of the tortoise and the hare that Dad told you? Yang Yi said. Yes, the little tortoise runs slowly, while the little hare runs fast. But when the little hare falls asleep, the little tortoise wins the competition. Shishi became interested and said a lot of things. Yes, for the same reason, if you win the first prize now, it doesn't mean that you can continue to win the first prize in the future. It just means that you, like the little hare, have a faster speed than the little tortoise. But you still need to continue to work hard to be in the lead, otherwise, the little tortoise will catch up with you. Yang Yi said. But I haven't won the prize yet. Shishi was a little confused. No matter whether you win the prize or not, think about it. Today you danced so much better than you did in the training. Isn't that a reward? Also, you made a small mistake on the stage, Now you realize your mistake and practice better in the future. Next time, if you have the chance to participate in a competition or a performance, you won't make any mistakes. Isn't that also a reward? Yang Yi said with a smile. That's why Dad said that the main purpose of us participating in the competition is not to win the prize, but to train ourselves and make progress in the competition. She blinked her eyes and looked at her father, as if she didn't fully understand. After hesitating for a moment, she nodded her head. Yang Yi knew that she still didn't fully understand, but it didn't matter. A lot of principles were explained in advance, and then she would subtly digest them in the process of growing up. Dad, I still want to win the prize. Holding her father's hand, when they returned to her mother's side, she whispered to her father, Because if I win the prize I can have more gold coins. What do you want so many gold coins for? You bought a lot of dolls. Yang Yi asked with a smile. Because I still have to go to Lu Weisha's house to play. I need a lot of gold coins to go there. She innocently replied. Then let's fight for the prize. Dad thinks that you still have a high chance of winning the prize, because you dance better than other children. In any case, Shishi's mood became better again. Usually, the judges' scores would only be calculated after 2 performances. While Yang Yi and his family were waiting backstage, Ding Xiang suddenly came over. She took out her phone and found Yang Yi. Brother Yang, Manager Yin has an urgent matter to talk to you about. Yang Yi's phone had been switched off after entering the small hall to prevent it from affecting Shishi's performance. Yin Yangfeng probably couldn't get through to Yang Yi's phone, so he went to look for Mo Xiaowan. Mo Xiaowan had gone on a business trip to receive the prize for Murphy, so she asked Yin Yangfeng to look for Ding Xiang. After many layers of communication, Yang Yi was finally able to get through. However, was Yin Yangfeng not busy with China's Voices peak night in the capital? Why was he looking for Yang Yi in such a hurry? Could something have happened? Chapter 959. Yang Yi and Murphy's absence from China's Top Voices night of the summit was not a big deal. There was no need to publicly inform their fans about it. If they had released a micro-broadcast to explain it, others might even mock them and question if they were not invited. Instead, they were just trying to find a way out for themselves. Of course, if such a thing had happened half a month ago, then nothing would have happened. But in the past half a month, Mo Fei had suddenly become the hottest star in the Chinese music industry with the help of her new album that was selling at a terrifying rate. This afternoon, a well-connected media outlet exposed the list of invited guests for the summit night of the summit. This news came from within Beijing television station. Of course, this was unavoidable. Even if no one leaked it, the reporters would be able to guess 70% of the results by checking the music industry celebrities who came to Beijing today. But with this news and the painstaking photos sent by the media outlet's paparazzi, the list of invited guests could be confirmed. There were a total of 9 Chinese music industry celebrities, including the previous 4 coaches invited as guests. There was also Bruce Levin, a popular singer in the United States. He was also the celebrity who had previously praised Yang Yi in the video of him singing for Murphy in Australia. But a lot of people soon realized that Yang Yi and Murphy were not on the list. Some people questioned. Could it be that Yang Yi and Murphy only appeared at the venue and did not go on stage to perform? But soon, a media outlet exposed the news of Yang Yi and Murphy's appearance in Jiangcheng. Although there were no photos to prove it, this gossip media outlet swore that they had seen Yang Yi and his family in Jiangcheng. That was interesting. Why did Yang Yi and Murphy not attend the summit night? It did not make sense. There was no reason for the program team not to invite Yang Yi and Murphy. After all, Yang Yi was the creator of China's Voice. At the same time, he was also a famous singer and writer. The program team could not possibly say that Yang Yi was not as famous as a singer who had been famous for a long time, and not invite their boss, right? Moreover, the program team had invited Bruce Levin. Many people knew that he had admired Yang Yi for a long time. With such a huge gimmick, they actually did not invite Yang Yi and Bruce Levin to perform on stage. It was such a waste. Let's talk about Mo Fei. Now that Mo Fei was so popular, and her new album was praised by many music critics, She was finally recognized as a heavenly queen with both beauty and singing skills. If she was not invited, what qualifications did other female stars have to be invited? Once they saw that Murphy's name was not on the list, the fans were immediately agitated. The comments section of China's Voice's official microbroadcasting and China Star's official microbroadcasting section were all taken over by Yang Yi and Murphy's fans. Their thoughts were cute. They thought that Yang Yi and Murphy's absence must be because the officials did not invite them. They thought that Yang Yi and Murphy must have been wronged. Condemning comments took over the comments section of both official micro-broadcasting sections. Their voices even overwhelmed the fans of many small-time celebrities who came to fight for justice. The program team could not take it anymore. After a discussion with Yin Yangfeng, head director Hong Yuman found Yang Yi and told him about the matter. Of course, they were not looking for trouble with their boss. Yin Yangfeng told Yang Yi that his strategy was to get Yang Yi to record a video of him giving his blessings to China's Voice and hand it over to the program team. It would then be broadcasted during the gala. After listening to Yin Yangfeng's explanation, Yang Yi stroked his chin and began to ponder. It was not that he could not record a video, it was just a piece of cake. However, Yang Yi considered that the program team's idea was not bad. Furthermore, to Yang Yi, this seemed like a good opportunity to advertise. What advertisement? Of course, it was the new mobile messaging app that Yang Yi had transferred Mao Peifu back from America last month for her to promote and operate. WeChat. However, regardless of whether it was a soft advertisement or not, Yang Yi still had to fork out the advertising fee. After all, the program's profits were to be shared with the capital television station. However, even if he had to fork out the advertising fee, Yang Yi felt that it was worth it. This was because the viewership ratings of Night of Pinnacle would definitely break through the roof. To be able to place an advertisement in front of the entire nation, the value of this advertisement must not be too high. Therefore, Yang Yi instructed Yin Yangfeng on how to operate it over the phone, and asked him to arrange it with Hong Yuman. When Yang Yi returned from the phone call, 2 contestants had already passed after Shi. The judges' scores for Shi's performance were also out. Full marks, Yang Shi got 9. For points, it can be considered a very good result. Murphy could not wait to tell Yang Yi. Obviously, Shi's mistake had caused her to deduct quite a number of points. However, the flaw could not obscure the beauty of the product. Shi's overall performance was too stunning, and the judges' scores were generally on the high side. After deducting the highest and lowest points, the remaining points were averaged out to be 9. For points, Xia Suqing smiled and said, "Just now, I went to ask the teachers at the scoring side. Yang Shi's current score is ranked in front of the children who have already performed. Moreover, the children in front of Yang Shi only got 9. 10 points at most." Xia Suqing was a little excited. Now, it can be said that Yang Shi will definitely win the award. As long as there aren't any outstanding contestants, Yang Shi will most likely win the first prize. As the instructor, she would definitely be proud if Shi won the first prize. Yang Yi was calmer. He smiled and nodded at Xia Suqing, saying, "Sorry to trouble you, Teacher Xia. However, it's better not to disturb others backstage. Let's bring Shi outside and wait for the news." After bidding farewell to Teacher Xia, Shi held her father's hand and walked in front with light steps. She even hummed happily. It seemed that good results could truly make the young lady happy. Who would not want to win? Yang Yi did not pour cold water on Shi at this moment to stop her from being so smug. This would affect Shi's mood greatly. Yang Yi only smiled and changed the topic. "Shi, do you know who came to watch your competition today?" "Yes." The young lady's voice was crisp and pleasant. She replied cheerfully, "Chichi Zhao Yu Shi Yun Xiner." She listed a long list of names and finally turned to look behind her father and mother. Ding Xiang was like an invisible person. She giggled and said, "And Sister Ding Xiang." "Other than them and Sister Ding Xiang, who else is there? Make a guess." Yang Yi said with a smile. Shi's eyes suddenly lit up. She asked happily, "Auntie is here too?" "Of course Uncle Gua is here too. They're all upstairs watching you dance. Let's go find them now, okay?" Yang Yi said with a smile. "Also, I asked Uncle Gua to record a video of you dancing. When the time comes, I'll send it to Grandpa and Grandma, okay? Cece's eyes curved in embarrassment as she giggled and said bashfully, but I can't dance very well. It's okay. When you go back, dance a better one. We'll both send it to Grandpa and Grandma so that they can see your improvement. Yang Yi said with a smile. Then I must dance well. Cece jumped at the side and shouted with great interest. Chapter 960. Although Yang Yi deliberately played down Shishi's idea of results, in fact, he still hoped that Shishi could win the championship. As they continued to watch the game on the second floor, Yang Yi's ears perked up as he listened to almost every child's score, his heart going up and down. Cece, on the other hand, didn't pay too much attention to these things. The little girl sat together with her friends and whispered in a low voice. Several times, she got so excited that she forgot to lower her voice. Thanks to Yang Yi's reminder, she didn't affect the surrounding audience and the competition. Finally, the last little contestant finished dancing. Although Yang Yi also saw that the last two children who didn't give any points didn't dance well, he still stood upstairs, frowning slightly, nervously waiting for the final news. 7-7-8-3. After a while, the host went on the stage to announce the results of the last two children. I won. Yang Yi breathed a sigh of relief, clenched his fists, and thought with a little pride in his heart. The audience had already left one after another. Of course, Yang Yi and the others still had to stay and wait for the award ceremony. 10 minutes later, the chaotic judges' table returned to silence. The host took the results and began to read the winners. The winner of the award goes to, the winner of the third prizes, the winner of the second prizes. The host read a long list of names, but Shishi's name was not mentioned. The little girl was a little uneasy in her father's arms and twisted. Papa, why am I not mentioned? Because she read from the back to the front. As for you, you should be in the front. Anyway, you're in the front. Wait patiently. It will be your turn soon. Yang Yi said to Shishi with a smile. Before Yang Yi's voice died away, a message came from the stage. The winner of the lower grade dance competition is Yang Shi from Class 3 Grade 1. Let's applaud and welcome these students to the stage to receive the award. Shishi blinked and reached out to pull her father's sleeve, whispering, Papa, it's me. Murphy was overjoyed. She turned around, bent down and hugged the little girl. She said excitedly, It's you. Shishi, you've won the first prize, the best first prize. Wow. Wow. However, when they heard Murphy's words, Shishi's little friends were even more excited. Lan Xian, Lu Xiaoyu and Chun Shiyin, these active little fellows, were kneeling in their seats and playing. At this moment, they were like little frogs, shouting one after another. Cece, on the other hand, turned her head and looked at them. She was smiling so much that her eyes were curved like beautiful crescent moons. It was unknown whether she was happy because she had won the award or because she was infected by the excitement of her friends. There was no need to elaborate on the process of receiving the award. It was worth mentioning that Shishi's first prize, in addition to the certificate and notebook prizes, also had a small surprise. After all, the dance competition was a large-scale competition that attracted more attention. Compared to the recitation competition, it received more investment. When a female school board member in charge of the award smiled and handed a small golden trophy to Shishi, Yang Yi saw the unconcealable surprise on the little girl's face. A small trophy. It was the first time Shishi had won a small trophy in her life. When she was in kindergarten, Shishi had basically won certificates, and they were the kind of certificates that the teacher had personally written with a pen. How could certificates be more beautiful than trophies? After the little girl came down from the stage, she couldn't wait to run to her father's side. She stretched out her little hand and showed it to her father happily. Papa, look, look. However, before Yang Yi could warm his hand with it, a group of little girls next to him, as well as a little boy, Nan Zhaoyu, scrambled to surround him. I want to see it too. I want to see it too. Night gradually fell. In the capital, the curtains to a grand event were slowly being drawn. The boy from Min Province, Jiang Yujie, followed the crowd and slowly squeezed into Beijing's 100,000-seat stadium. Then, he found his seat in the Eastern Grandstand. Jiang Yujie was a fan of variety shows. He used to be a diehard fan of the Limit Challenge. Because Yang Yi and Dan Hongkue collaborated and sang the Hokkien song, Strive to Win, in the last episode of the first season, he also became a fan of Yang Yi. However, after half a year, Jiang Yujie, who had no other shows to watch, had now become a fan of China's Voice. Of course, Jiang Yujie could only watch China's Voice on TV, because he was not a rich second-generation heir. He was just an ordinary university student, and did not have the capital to invest a large amount of money to follow a show. But who asked him to be so lucky? A few weeks ago, China's Voice's official micro-broadcasting followed Yang Yi's instructions, and organized a raffle to draw attention and repost. They drew out 20 tickets for the live show and gave them to the lucky fans. When the raffle ended, the number of reposts for this micro-broadcasting was as high as 900,000. Jiang Yujie did not even dare to imagine that he would be one of the 20 lucky fans. But it was a great feeling. Especially when Jiang Yujie came to Beijing's 100,000-seat stadium. Seeing the lively atmosphere and the grand layout of the venue. A huge stage, a huge screen. Jiang Yujie could not help but feel proud of the show that he supported. Only China's Voice had the guts to make the finals of a talent show into such a sensational event. After finding his seat, Jiang Yujie took out his phone and took pictures left and right. He excitedly posted pictures of the live show on micro-broadcasting. Not long after, Jiang Yujie saw a person wearing the Beijing television station's uniform. He was carrying a camera and following a very beautiful host as they walked along the aisle. This was the host for the live interview. For today's program, Beijing television station had sent out a very luxurious lineup of hosts. They had even produced and broadcasted a pre-World Cup, the banquet of the rich, before the start of the summit night. However, Jiang Yujie was not so lucky to be chosen this time. The beautiful host was interviewing a girl not far away. She asked her which contestant she thought would be the champion. "Gohan, it must be Gohan." Jiang Yujie heard the girl shouting excitedly. This Gohan was the contestant who had eliminated Qianli Chuanshu in the mentor assessment. He was the one who had the last laugh in Lin Qitian's group. "Why do you think it will be Gohan?" The female host smiled and asked, "Are you a fan of Gohan?" "Yes, I like Gohan a lot. But I think Gohan might be the champion. It's not just because I'm Gohan's fan, but because Gohan is really strong," the girl said excitedly. "And Gohan's mentor is teacher Lin Qitian, a professional professor. He will definitely guide Gohan well." Jiang Yujie listened from the side and couldn't help but pout. "If you ask me, I definitely won't choose Gohan. How can he sing as well as Sulu?" Jiang Yujie thought to himself. And Sulu is too inspirational. A grassroots singer who started out as a bar singer actually fought to the end. She's too admirable. Jiang Yujie looked down on Gohan because he was born with good looks. Also, the media exposed that Gohan was the lead singer of an unknown group in the past. He could be considered to have made a name for himself. Such a contestant would be liked by young girls, but would not be pursued by music lovers like Jiang Yujie. For a contestant who had made a name for himself, how could he bully a grassroots contestant? Sulu was not pretty. Jiang Yujie supported Sulu not because of her looks. As an ordinary person, Jiang Yujie naturally felt happy when he saw a grassroots contestant like Sulu making a comeback. Of course, he would support Sulu to be a dark horse to the end. Chapter 961. Amidst the cheers of the 100,000 audience members, China's Top Voice's first season's night of the summit finally began. The opening act started with a dozen or so previously eliminated students from China's Top Voice performing a song about their dreams. Among them were 2 members of Thousand Miles Creek. Although they were not eliminated in the championship battle, it was within everyone's expectations that they would be invited due to their special status. There was nothing particularly exciting about the song, but Jiang Yujie was filled with emotions when he saw the dozen or so students who had been packaged and trained by their management company. They looked completely different from before. This show is really a star-making machine. These students who were still young and shy during the blind audition stage, and some of them who didn't even know how to dress up, look no different from celebrities when they dress up. Jiang Yujie voiced the thoughts of many of the audience members. Indeed, everyone had grown a lot in the past few months. It was not only in terms of singing, but also in terms of stage performance, spirit, and so on. However, the interesting thing was that these changes were visible. The audience felt like they were playing a nurturing game. They had watched them grow step by step through the television screen over the past few months. Naturally, they were filled with emotions. After the opening performance ended, the two hosts went up and gave an opening speech. Then they started discussing the controversial news of the show's decision not to invite Yang Yi and Murphy. It can't be right? They can't really be here, right? Jiang Yujie was a little lost in the audience, but he quickly thought to himself in surprise. Of course they were not here. Yang Yi and his family were still at home watching television. The eloquent male host smiled and said, "There's actually a reason why the designer and founder of our show, Mr. Yang Yi, couldn't make it to the night of the summit. However, I can't tell you the reason." Why? Could it be that it's hard to explain? The female host purposely looked like she had something to hide. Of course not. It's because Mr. Yang Yi wanted to use a special method to personally tell everyone, as well as his wife, Madame Murphy, who had just set a new record in record sales, to express their blessings to China's top voice and our students. The male host said mysteriously, "Of course, there's also a small piece of good news to announce." The audience below the stage was already cheering. Although not all of them were Yang Yi's fans, there weren't many who didn't like the songs written by Yang Yi. What's more, the host said that Murphy would also appear. This was enough to make the entire country's audience look forward to it. The host did not waste any more time. Soon, the male host took out a cell phone and connected to Yang Yi on the spot. At the same time, a cell phone interface appeared on the big screen behind them. This was obviously the projection of the host's phone. There was a small dot that performed a series of operations. He opened the WeChat app, found his friend Yang Yi, and quickly clicked on the video call function. What is this? Jiang Yujie was as confused as the rest of the audience. He watched with a curious expression. Why is it like a phone call? Soon, the video call request was accepted. The big screen flashed, and the video call interface appeared. The small frame in the upper right corner was the image of the host taken by the front camera of the phone held up by the host. In the background, Yang Yi's face, which Jiang Yujie was already very familiar with, appeared. Oh, Jiang Yujie, like the rest of the audience, cheered in surprise. What made them even more surprised was that after Yang Yi exchanged a few words with the host, he fixed the phone to a control stick. This way, the field of view was even bigger. Yang Yi then called Murphy over. Not only that, a beautiful little head suddenly squeezed between them and appeared on the big screen. Shishi. Jiang Yujie shouted excitedly. Like him, many of the audience were Shishi's fans, and they all became restless. To be able to see Sisi again, this was indeed a very big surprise. Yang Yi, can you hear the cheers in the stadium? The audience is looking forward to your and Murphy's arrival. The male host turned the camera around and filmed the scene for Yang Yi. On the screen, Yang Yi also smiled. He also turned the camera around to let the audience see his TV. Then he turned it back. Of course I heard it. Look, I'm still watching the live broadcast. I'm very excited too. Then, Yang Yi and Murphy spoke one after another in the video call, explaining to the audience why they couldn't attend today. So it's because Shishi has a competition. Jiang Yujie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he quickly smiled and shook his head. He thought to himself, this is to be expected. How can Yang Yi and Murphy abandon their child and go to work? Yes, this reason was ridiculous for a celebrity. It was as unacceptable as a celebrity who received an invitation to the Spring Festival Gala, but rejected it because they couldn't have a reunion dinner with their family. However, everyone who was familiar with Yang Yi and Murphy's temperament thought it was normal, like Jiang Yujie. Weren't this couple always like this? Moreover, wasn't this also an important reason why they were liked by so many people? Moreover, Shishi had participated in the school's dance competition. How were her results? Many fans had their appetites whetted. However, Yang Yi was very despicable. He did not say anything. Instead, he returned to the topic and gave his blessings to the 4 contestants of China's Top Voice. F***CK. Why don't you say something? Jiang Yujie felt like his heart was being scratched by 100 claws. Like many of Xishi's fans, he wanted to drag Yang Yi out and beat him up. However, this was also because Jiang Yujie did not have time to watch the micro-broadcast. In fact, Murphy had already posted the micro-broadcast and showed off the golden trophy that Xishi had won. Putting that aside for now, if Yang Yi had simply given his blessings, then this little interlude would have ruined the atmosphere of China's Top Voice's peak night. However, Yang Yi had prepared a little surprise. Here, I'd like to tell everyone a piece of very good news. Yang Yi smiled as he spoke on the big screen. Due to China's Top Voice's innovative format and exciting content, not only is it popular in China, it also has a sizable audience overseas. It has also received very high reviews. Recently, many foreign television stations, not only from America, but also many European television stations have contacted us, hoping to bring in our program. Jiang Yujie's eyes widened in surprise. Could it be that there was really some breaking news? Yes. China Star Productions had always kept a low profile, and all this while, the media's focus was more on the competition between the students and the coaches. There was no news of this at all. Finally, Yang Yi announced, "Today, I'm very happy to tell everyone that we have taken the first step. After a period of friendly negotiations, America's SBC TV station will become our American partner. They will work together with China Star Productions to create the Voice of America." Although they had already guessed it, when Yang Yi announced the news, it still caused the audience to be surprised and cheered. This was too amazing. Jiang Yujie was so excited that he was trembling all over. Even tears were about to fall. He was not touched, nor was he sad. He was simply so excited that he could not control himself. One must know that although the Chinese entertainment industry was very developed, there were not many programs that could make it out in all these years. On the contrary, it was common for domestic television stations to import program copyrights from Europe, America, and Korea. Finally, there was a program that could make it out. How could Jiang Yujie not be excited? At that moment, he was filled with a sense of pride. He did not even listen to Yang Yi's introduction of the Voice of America, nor did he listen to Yang Yi mention that Bruce Levin, who was present today, was the first coach of the Voice of America. At that moment, Jiang Yujie only had one thought in his mind. Amazing! My voice. Chapter 962. To Xishi, winning the dance competition was the prize that made her the happiest. It was not the praise from her friends like Lan Xian and Yu Xiaowei, or the adults like Yang Huan, Guozi, or sister Ding Xiang. It was also not the additional 4 gold coins that she could exchange for a doll, or save for a trip to the amusement park. Instead, it was the small trophy that represented more than its value. That's right, this small trophy was not worth much at all. It was not like the crystal or bronze trophies that Murphy and Yang Yi had received. It was a trophy given to a child by the school, so the material would naturally not be of such high quality. Yang Yi guessed that it was probably made of some kind of lighter alloy. Holding it in his hand, it felt as light as a piece of paper. It felt so unreal that it felt like it would break if he dropped it. Moreover, the workmanship was average. Although the color was not faded, the color was not very balanced. The engravings were also not very neat, which made Yang Yi feel a little uncomfortable looking at it. But Xishi treated it like a treasure. On the way home from school, she held it in her hands happily. When they reached home, Xishi asked her mother to open the display cabinet where Yang Yi and Murphy's trophies were kept. This cabinet was placed in Yang Yi's study room. The reason why she called her mother and not her father was because Yang Yi was busy preparing dinner. After the cabinet was opened, the young girl handed over her trophy and asked her mother to place it in the cabinet. She also wanted to place it in the middle of the cabinet, between her father's and her mother's trophies. She stood on a stool and looked at it for a long time before she nodded in satisfaction. However, when everyone was watching China's Voice together at night, Xishi could not sit still for long after the video call ended. She asked her father to bring her trophy over. With the trophy placed on the cabinet, it was only left with the function of displaying it. How could she hold herself back? She had not had enough fun yet. So while Yang Yi and Mo Fei were sitting on the sofa watching TV, chatting and laughing while pointing at the performances of the students on the camera, the little girl was holding her small trophy and playing with it happily on the carpet. Although the trophy was made of ordinary material, it was still gold in color, which suited the Chinese aesthetic. She looked at it over and over again, and the more she looked at it, the more she liked it. Tong Tong did not care at first, as he preferred his robot toy that could twist and turn. But after playing with it for a while, the little guy felt bored and turned to look for his sister. His gaze landed on the shiny trophy in his sister's hands. What was that? It seemed quite fresh. Tong stuck and crawled towards his sister on all fours. The distance was too short, there was no need for him to walk. Cece was holding her trophy when a chubby little hand suddenly reached out and pressed on it. She turned her head in confusion, and her little brother's curious face appeared in her line of sight. Tong Tong seemed to be embarrassed. When he saw that his sister had noticed his little action, he retracted his hand and grinned with a few teeth. Hee. She was more generous. Seeing that Tong Tong seemed to be very interested in her trophy, she generously handed it to him and said, "Do you want to see it?" It was a simple question, so even if Tong Tong did not fully understand it, he could still guess what it meant. When he saw that his sister had taken the initiative to hand it to him, he happily waved his little hands and said in a confused voice, "Yes, yes." The conversation between the two little guys attracted Murphy's attention. She stretched out her hand and tugged at Yang Yi's sleeve to let him see the interaction between the siblings. After Tong Tong received his sister's trophy, he curiously held it in his hands and examined it carefully. However, unlike Shi, who carefully examined the trophy, Tong Tong did not know how to hold it firmly. At first, he held the trophy with both hands and flipped it over. Then his hands slipped and the trophy fell onto the carpet. "You dropped it." Shi looked distressed and anxious. She first grumbled softly before she hurriedly grabbed the trophy to check it. She only handed it back to Tong Tong after she confirmed that it was not damaged. After Tong Tong saw that his sister had taken the trophy, he crawled over and placed his little hands on his sister's legs. This time, Shi paid more attention and guided Tong Tong on how to hold the trophy. However, Tong Tong was not interested in the trophy. He did not pay attention to the engravings around the trophy or the words engraved on the base. Instead, he was curious about the big mouth of the trophy. It was a small trophy that was not even as big as Yang Yi's fist. As long as he held it in his hand, he would be able to see it clearly. However, Tong Tong did not want to look at it normally. He held the trophy up and moved it closer to his face. In the end, he covered his eyes with the trophy. Moreover, he did not cover only one of his eyes. Tong Tong was insatiable. He wanted to look at the trophy with both of his eyes, so he covered his glabella and only revealed half of his eyes. Hee, little brother, why are you so funny? Shi was amused by Tong Tong's actions. She did not stop him and giggled. Tong Tong seemed to be encouraged. He hugged the trophy and covered his mouth with it as if he was drinking water. He even let out a muffled laugh. Shi was also interested. She reached out her hand and asked Tong Tong for the trophy. "Give it to me too." Tong Tong did not want to return the trophy to his sister at first. However, when he saw his sister smiling at him happily, he was influenced by her and handed the trophy back to her. Then, Yang Yi and Murphy saw Shi copy Tong Tong. She hugged the trophy and covered her mouth with the mouth of the trophy. Shi made muffled sounds. Tong Tong opened his mouth slightly and stared at his sister without blinking. Shi realized that she could not speak if she covered her mouth too tightly. She moved her mouth slightly so that the little girl's muffled voice could be heard. "Little brother, can you hear me?" Her voice was completely different from Shishi's. Of course, the rhythm of her voice was similar. Tong Tong stared blankly for a while before he realized that his sister was talking. He seemed to be slow for a few seconds. Then he suddenly became happy and started dancing with joy. He was really dancing with joy. He even kicked his little feet. What kind of magic did his sister have to make him so happy? You too. She excitedly stuffed her trophy into her little brother's hand. Tong Tong wanted to change the way he played, but She did not agree. She urged him to cover his mouth with the trophy as she spoke. Mm. Tong Tong did not know what to say. He mumbled a few times and put down the trophy. Yang Yi and Mo Fei found it funny and inexplicable at the same time. These two little guys really couldn't understand their thoughts at all. At this moment, the siblings looked at each other again and let out a string of bell-like laughter. At least they were having fun, right? Chapter 963. As Tong Tong gradually grew up, he was no longer as sleepy as before. He was now like a normal child, taking an afternoon nap in the day, going to bed at 8 p.m., and waking up at 6 a.m. This was his more stable schedule now. Of course, if he woke up at 1 or 2 a.m. in the middle of the night and pestered his parents to play, it would definitely be because Tong Tong slept more during the day. Therefore, in order to prevent the little rascal from disturbing others in the middle of the night, Yang Yi and Murphy basically coaxed him to sleep after 8:30 a.m. She slept even later. However, when Yang Yi accompanied Shi to read for a while, told her a story, and coaxed her to sleep, Murphy had already finished watching Peak Night. She turned off the TV and came upstairs. Who won in the end? Yang Yi asked with a smile. Guess. Murphy mischievously kept him in suspense. It's definitely impossible to guess. This is not just a competition of singing skills, but also a competition of fans and popularity. In the end, the voting results from various channels were aggregated by percentage and used as the final criteria for elimination and promotion. There's too much chance in this. Yang Yi shook his head lightly. Of course, Yang Yi did not mean that there was any fraud in this. The program that he directed had to be fair and just. Whether it was the finals or the previous episodes, Yang Yi had requested for the program team to invite a third party to participate in the voting process to ensure that no one manipulated the voting process behind the scenes. As for whether or not there would be people who would hire the internet water army to rig the votes, of course, this was also something that had been prepared by the technical staff beforehand, relying on the fact that only real names could be used to vote, as well as the various technical obstacles, as well as the artificial detection of anomalies and other preparations. China's voice was still able to eliminate the phenomenon of vote rigging to a certain extent. However, voting was still subjective, and Yang Yi could not be sure who would win in the end. Seeing that Yang Yi was not willing to guess, Murphy proudly announced the answer. Of course it's Su Lu, who I've always supported, who won in the end. I already said that her singing skills were good, and she even hid a trick up her sleeve. In the end, she sang Hometown and defeated Gohan. 10 minutes ago, the atmosphere in Beijing's 100,000-seat stadium had reached its climax. Each of the 4 champions could be said to be an outstanding singer with outstanding abilities. In round after round of competition, there were people who left the stage dejectedly. In the end, only Gohan and Su Lu were left. The whole process was intense and exciting. It made the live audience and those in front of their televisions feel like their hearts were about to jump out of their chests with every vote. Even so, they couldn't help but shout, "Amazing!" The atmosphere was especially exciting. Jiang Yujie felt like he was about to suffocate, but he still waved his fist excitedly for the student he supported to advance. It wasn't easy for Su Lu. After the first 2 rounds of singing, Gohan was directly promoted to the 4th round by the audience voting, while Su Lu had to participate in the 3rd round of the competition. She had to fight her way through and enter the final round. The audience was gradually divided into 2 groups. The fans who supported Gohan and Su Lu were cheering for the players they supported. Finally, the final round of the battles began. The first to sing was Gohan. Gohan continued with his previous style, but this time he chose a more difficult rock song. His sonorous and thick voice and unbridled stage performance ignited the enthusiasm of the audience at the scene. Rock is very emotional. Jiang Yujie listened to Gohan's song and secretly worried for Su Lu. Rock wasn't Su Lu's area of expertise. Su Lu's voice was a little hoarse. She was better at slow songs. She was good at using the sincerity in her voice to move the audience. Of course, it wasn't that Sulu didn't know how to sing rock. She had used a rock song in the previous competition and showed that she had a good soprano. However, Sulu wasn't a professional rock singer. Previously, Luo Jian had chosen a rock song that was more suitable for her voice. If she sang too much, she would definitely be exposed. But if Sulu didn't sing rock, would there be any hope of winning? One had to know that Gohan's song was similar to Once Upon You. It was very infectious. Jiang Yujie felt his scalp tingle as he enjoyed it. With such a shocking performance, how could Jiang Yujie be worried for Sulu? Not long after, Sulu walked onto the stage. The song she was going to sing, although there was no announcement, when the familiar prelude of the flute sounded, the audience was already in shock. Isn't this Hometown? Jiang Yujie couldn't help but straighten his back. This song was from the 1980s, but he had heard it before. The melody was too familiar. But this song was a typical slow song. Singing such a retro slow song, how could it compete with other rock songs? Jiang Yujie was anxious for Sulu. However, Sulu quickly used her distinctive voice to silence Jiang Yujie and the other audience members who were discussing fervently. Note: you can listen to Su Fei's version of Hometown's Clouds. This is the song that exists in this world, Hometown. Hometown's clouds float across the horizon, they keep calling to me. Her singing style was the same as the original, but Sulu's singing style was unique. Her female voice had a hint of sadness and hoarseness, while her voice matched the song perfectly. When Jiang Yujie heard this, he felt as if his heart was being squeezed, and a wave of pain spread through him. The singing in the middle silenced the noisy audience. Such a beautiful voice was worthy of everyone's calmness. They let go of the impetuousness from listening to the rock song, and closed their eyes to listen quietly. There's a voice calling to me. Come back, come back. This line was perhaps the part of the entire song that best reflected the contestants' singing skills. Sulu once again demonstrated to the audience and coaches her amazing improvement over the past few months. Not only did she manage to sing the high notes of this part, she also sang it with ease. Her hoarse voice had an air of inspiration that made several coaches standing by the side of the stage couldn't help but stand up for her. After the song, the MC went on stage. Because she had to give the backstage staff time to count the votes, she asked a few questions like an interview. Among them was why Sulu chose such a song as her last song to compete for the championship. Because I really like this song. For my music dream, I drifted in Beijing for many years. Although I'm very strong, every time I hear this song, I can't help but think of my hometown and my parents. So I've always wanted to sing such a song. I want to sing it for myself and for all my friends who are working hard for their dreams. Sulu said sincerely. Just as Jiang Yujie thought, the MC also talked about the shortcomings of this song and rock songs. She even talked about its age. Maybe many young audience members haven't heard this song before. When I mentioned this to teacher Luo Jian, he also told me to consider it carefully. After all, every song in the grand finals is very important. But in the end, teacher Luo Jian still supported me. He said, no matter what kind of results I can achieve today, I've already achieved great results by participating in China's Top Voice. I've also embarked on the path of music that I've always dreamed of. Singing such a song is also good. It can make me remember not to forget where I came from and where I'm going. Only then can I go further. After Sulu finished speaking, she even bowed gratefully in Luo Jian's direction. Regardless of whether you can win the championship or not, you're already the champion in my heart. Jiang Yujie looked at Sulu on stage and felt very emotional. His fondness for her deepened. But just as Murphy and Yang Yi had said, the results were out. In the end, Sulu won the first season of China's Top Voice. A grassroots singer's counterattack, all the way to the end. Sulu's road to success was as exciting as a novel's plot. The audience was satisfied, and the reporters were also in a frenzy. They had too much material to report, and this story might even be mentioned repeatedly in the future. However, for Yang Yi and his family, the excitement of China's Top Voice had come to an end. Their lives were still the same as before, and they could do whatever they wanted. The new album's protection period was not over yet, and Murphy was still continuing her legend. Yang-yi also had other work to do. He remotely controlled the amusement park's design bidding. In the end, the design rights were handed over to a German design studio led by the world's top designers. The first phase of the amusement park's construction had officially begun. As for Shi, after the novelty of winning the award had worn off, she had to continue working hard. This was because her first final exam was coming in a month's time. Chapter 964. At the end of December, the weather in Jiang City was a little bad. The temperature dropped sharply, and there was light snow outside. Of course, the snow in Jiang City wasn't heavy or thick enough, but it was enough to cover the mountains and rivers with a layer of white mixed with black. It was beautiful, but it was not suitable for a family trip, especially for Yang Yi's family. They had a little guy who was only a little more than a year old, and was prone to catching a cold. In such cold weather, it was best to stay at home and play. Originally, Yang Yi did have plans for this weekend. Although Murphy still had a week of publicity, her results were more stable. She also got the results that others dreamed of but couldn't get. She didn't need to work hard to increase sales, so this weekend, she had 2 days of rest, which was rare. Taking advantage of this time when Murphy was at home, Yang Yi originally planned to take Murphy and the children to the northern foot of Ting Mountain to see the wintersweet blooming all over the mountain. Although the wintersweet was only planted artificially, the government of Jiang City supported the surrounding farmers to plant wintersweet on the sloping hillsides. But after a few years of development, the wintersweet planted on a large scale had become a famous winter beauty in Jiang City. From November to March, almost every weekend, people would drive there to play. The local farmers also made the rural tourism business in full swing. Coincidentally, this wasn't the key time to plant agricultural products. The farmers' development of the tourism industry also brought a new source of income for their wallets. However, in such a snowy weather, the plan to go out to play could only be ruined. Yang Yi calculated the time and changed it to next week. Murphy just finished her publicity work for her new album. If the weather was good, he could take Murphy and the children to see the wintersweet. Of course, this week's activities and the next week's activities would be squeezed together. Originally, Yang Yi had arranged for everyone to go to Tianmu Lake in Yanling to soak in the hot spring next week. Fortunately, the distance between Jiang City and Yanling wasn't too far, especially from Ting Mountain. Yang Yi could take his family to see the wintersweet, and then soak in the hot spring. However, the problem now was that they couldn't go out to play this weekend. What could they do at home? Moreover, Yang Yi still had to face the disappointed Shi. The little girl had been waiting for her father to take her out to play this week. When Yang Yi announced the news in the morning, Shi shook her little butt and shouted, "Papa, but I still want to see the beautiful little plum blossom. Plans can't keep up with changes. Look outside, it's snowing. If you go out to play, you'll freeze until your face is swollen. Where's the fun in that?" Yang Yi rubbed Shishi's head with a smile and said, "Let's go out next week." Shishi looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. It was still snowing outside. However, through the glass window, Shishi could see that Bao Bao, who had come out of the dog door, was jumping excitedly on the snow-stained lawn. This silly Bao Bao seemed to have never seen snow before. He jumped high and opened his mouth as if he wanted to bite the falling snowflakes. However, Bao Bao's body movements were very good. He didn't fall to the ground like a silly husky. Bao Bao could be seen jumping vigorously, rolling in the air, and landing steadily on the ground. His posture was very cool. Bao Bao was playing so happily in the snow, which made Shishi very envious. The little girl intertwined her 2 little fingers and looked sad and wronged. She muttered, "But it's not fun at home." Fortunately, Yang Yi was prepared. How can it not be fun? Look, what did I prepare? Yang Yi took out a colorful book and shook it at Shishi with a smile. "I don't want to read anymore. I want to go out and play." Shishi was still muttering. However, out of curiosity, the little girl still moved back from the floor-to-ceiling windows. She looked back 3 times with each step and rubbed against her father's arms. She reached out and pressed the book in her father's hand to see what was on it. Cool science experiments. Shishi could only recognize the word cool on the cover. This is cool. Shishi pointed at the first word and turned to look at her father. Yang Yi smiled and read the title of the book. He said, "It means very cool, very interesting scientific experiments. This is a book that tells you to play scientific games." This book was one of the more interesting children's books that Sahara Publishing House was going to import from the United States. When Lu Benji reported to Yang Yi took a fancy to it. Although the imported translation had not been produced yet, Yang Yi still asked Lu Benji to get him an original English version. It just so happened that it came in handy today. Is it fun? Shishi hesitated for a moment. She looked up at her father and asked with her small mouth pouting. "Let's try it. Let's call your brother too," Yang Yi said with a smile. Although Shishi was still a little reluctant and still wanted to play outdoors, the curiosity in her heart made her let go of her obsession. After breakfast, the little girl followed behind her father and watched him prepare the experimental equipment in the kitchen. This is an egg, this is salt, this is a spoon. We also need a transparent glass. The glass for drinking water is a little too small. Yang Yi got the equipment and put it in the small basket in Shishi's hand. He let the little girl share part of the work. This way, she would feel more involved. Shishi's thinking speed was still able to keep up with her father's talking speed. Listening to her father's nagging, she blinked and pointed to the glass bottle that her mother used to arrange flowers. She said, "Papa, let's use this." Because it was winter, it was not easy for flowers to survive. The batch of flowers that Murphy had arranged before had been disposed of by Yang Yi after they withered. Now Murphy did not have time to buy new flowers, so this month, the glass bottle used for flower arrangement was temporarily empty. Yes, this bottle is neither big nor small. It is just enough for us to use. Moreover, it is transparent. You and your brother can better observe our experiment. Yang Yi smiled and gave Shishi a thumbs up. He said, "You're amazing. You helped me find the equipment we need at once." Although it was only a small matter, under her father's exaggerated praise, Shishi's heart was filled with a beautiful sense of satisfaction. She held the small basket in her two small hands, twisted her small body left and right, and giggled. The atmosphere of the experiment was getting stronger and stronger. Shishi also gradually forgot the unhappiness of not being able to go out to play. When her father finished washing the bottle and filling it with water, she happily followed her father back to the living room. "You went outside to play in the snow. Look, you got so dirty and stepped on the floor. There are so many black footprints." Murphy was scolding Bao, who had come back from a wild outside. It was no wonder that Murphy scolded him. This guy was still wet from the melting snow. On the floor near the door of the house, as Murphy said, there were black footprints like Bao Bao's plum blossoms. Dogs can sense human emotions. There are documentaries that say that dogs are one of the few animals that can see human emotions from human faces. Bao Bao at this moment, although he did not understand the words of his mistress, he still knew that he had done something wrong and was being scolded. He was lying on the ground with his head buried between his feet. He did not dare to look at his master. "It's okay. Let's go wash it." Yang Yi looked at the footprints on the floor and felt a little uncomfortable. He had to put down the experiment. Shishi was responsible for looking after Tong Tong. Murphy took Bao Bao to the bathroom to wash it, and Yang Yi was going to take a mop to clean the black footprints on the floor. After a lot of tossing, it was almost 10 o'clock. Yang Yi took the children to do the experiment finally ended. Chapter 965. After taking a bath and drying his fur, Steamed Bun felt refreshed. He shook his body contentedly and eagerly went to Cece's side. He rubbed and rubbed against her, acting like a spoiled child. He was smart enough to know that he had done something wrong. Only she would not be angry with him. So he ran to Shishi as if he had found a shelter. However, Shishi did not have time to play with him. After scratching his head, she followed her father excitedly and sat on a picnic mat in the living room. Yang Yi did not want to dirty the carpet because it was an experiment with water. "Come on, let's see what Daddy and Sister are doing." Murphy picked up Lil Panther, who was about to walk away, and sat on the picnic mat with Lil Panther with a smile on his face. Little Momo was very curious about everything. He climbed on top of the tree like a tiger, looking to the left and right. Hey Shishi, how did you break this egg? When Yang took out the egg, he saw a crack on it. Although it was not broken, Yang was worried that this crack could cause flaws in the experiment, maybe. Shishi blinked her eyes. She held her father's arm and knelt up. She looked at the egg, but she did not find any clues. When did she break the egg? Maybe you accidentally knocked the egg against something when you were holding the basket. But it doesn't matter. There are still eggs in the fridge. Daddy will get a new one. You can cook this at noon. Yang did not blame Shishi too much and said with a smile, I'll get it, I'll get it. Shishi was very active. She got up from the ground and ran to the kitchen excitedly. After a while, the little girl ran back happily with an egg in her hand. The first experiment that Yang wanted to do with Shishi and Tong Tong was very simple. He filled a glass vase with clean water. Looking through the glass, the water was crystal clear and very beautiful. However, Yang only added half a bottle of water, which was enough to submerge the egg. Come on Shishi, put the egg in. Yang put down the glass vase. There was a wooden board in the middle of the picnic mat, which was just enough for the glass vase to be placed on. But will it break? Shishi held the egg, hesitated, and looked at her father worriedly. It doesn't matter. Put it in gently. We still have water resistance. Yang said. The mouth of the vase wasn't very big, so Cece could hold the egg and put her little hand in. However, because the inside was slightly tight, a bit like a large caliber decanter, Cece could only put her little hand near the water level. If she went any lower, her hand that was holding the egg couldn't fit in. Put it in. Yang ordered when he saw Shishi's cautious look. Shishi let go of her hand, and the egg fell into the water. It swayed and sank and finally landed at the bottom of the vase. Shishi saw this scene and heaved a sigh of relief. She pulled her little hand out of the vase. Wipe your hands. Murphy was beside them, actively doing the logistics work. She took out 2 pieces of tissue and let Shishi wipe her hands. When she put the egg in just now, the water splashed on the little girl's fingers. Xiao Taiying didn't know what his sister was doing, but he had a feeling that his sister and father were up to something big. He was also in his mother's arms, stretching his neck out and watching with rapt attention, not even blinking his eyes. Okay, let's add the salt now. Yang was not in a hurry to explain. He took the salt shaker from the basket and handed it to Shishi. He let Shishi do all this. Shishi did it herself, so she could feel and remember more deeply. Is this salt? Murphy was a curious child. She poked the white salt foam in the salt shaker with interest, and then put it in her mouth to taste it. Before Yang said anything, Murphy nodded and said, Yes, it's salty. Tong Tong had been turning his little head to look at his mother's actions. Now that he saw his mother smacking her lips, he thought it was something delicious. He hurriedly grabbed his mother's arm and got up. Yes, eat. Tong Tong said as he opened his little mouth. You want it too? Murphy looked at the little boy with amusement. She thought for a while and said, Okay, you can try it too. You can also get to know the taste of salt. Then Yang saw Murphy excitedly poke the salt shaker with her finger. She then let the little boy have a taste of her salt. In fact, this was a little unhygienic. For example, it would dirty the salt in the salt shaker. Yang eyelids twitched when he saw this, but he did not say anything. This was his house, so it was not too dirty. Maybe it was because Mo Fei had just licked her fingers, so it was a little wet. This time, Mo Fei was covered with a little too much salt. Mo Fei, who was careless, did not notice this problem. Little Momo treated it as something delicious, held it in her mouth and sucked it hard. In the next second, Yang saw Tong Tong's face wrinkle up like a bitter gourd. He spat out a mouthful of salt. Of course, the little boy did not know how to spit. He could only spit out some saliva, which could not solve the problem of the bitter saltiness in his mouth. This scene was very similar to the videos of children eating lemons that Yang had seen on the internet. Tong Tong was like that now. He sat there, frowning because of the saltiness, and waving his little hands around. Haha, okay. Is it too salty? Mom will get some water for you to rinse your mouth. Murphy knew that it was not a big deal, so she was not too worried. She just comforted the little boy and got some water for him to drink. Tong Tong drank a few mouthfuls of water to wash away the bitter taste in his mouth. Only then did he return to normal. Yang Yi and Shishi watched from the side happily. Yang Yi even asked Shishi jokingly, "Do you want to try it too?" "No, no." The little girl shook her head like a rattle drum. She giggled and said, "I don't want to eat salt. I've eaten it before. I know it's very salty." Yang Yi thought about it. She was right. When he cooked in the past, Shishi would watch from the side. Under his instruction, she had tasted salt and white sugar. This was a little off topic. After Shishi finished laughing, she began to experiment. She added salt into the bottle with a small spoon. After a while, the water became a little murky, but the eggs did not float up. Shishi turned to look at her father in confusion. Did she do the wrong experiment? There was nothing wrong with the experiment. Yang Yi thought about it and understood what the problem was. Our bottle is too big. There is a little too much water in it. Add more salt and pour it in boldly, Yang Yi instructed. After pouring the salt for a while, Yang Yi asked Shishi to pick up a long wooden chopstick and stir it to speed up the melting of the salt. A miracle happened. Chapter 966. Little Rascal felt that the jar was not filled with anything good. In fact, it was the most disgusting thing in the world. Tong Tong did not understand why his sister and father were so interested in the jar. He even wanted to stop his sister from touching the terrible thing. However, Murphy thought that he was going to cause trouble, so she held him in her arms and stopped him from moving. The little boy struggled and tried to escape from his mother's arms. "No. Let me go. I want to save my sister." Wow. Suddenly, Tong Tong heard his sister's excited cheers. He stopped moving in confusion and raised his head to look over. Of course, Tong Tong did not notice the details. He only saw his sister and father looking at the big jar carefully. If this was a cartoon, there should be many question marks floating above the little guy's head at this moment. What happened? Why is my sister so excited? Little Momo didn't notice that the egg in the glass bottle had already floated up from the muddy water. Although it was only floating in the water, this change was enough to make Shishi cry out in surprise. "Papa, the egg is floating." Shishi turned her head and excitedly reported to her father. "It hasn't completely floated yet. Try adding more salt." Yang Yi encouraged Shishi and finished the experiment. Of course, there was no need to elaborate on the following experiment. It was just adding more salt to make the egg float. What Cece was more curious about was what kind of magic could make the eggs float out of the water. After growing up, Shishi, who had not asked about it for a long time, asked her father with great interest today, "Papa, why is it like this?" This scientific principle was not difficult to explain. The difficult part was how to explain it to Shishi. Shishi did not know what buoyancy was, what specific weight or density was. Therefore, Yang Yi pondered for a while and said, "Shishi, which do you think is heavier, the egg or the water?" Shishi tilted her head and thought for a while. In the end, she chose water. "Because it's very heavy. It's hard for me to lift it up." Shishi pointed at the glass bottle of water and said seriously, "But the eggs are easy to get." Yang Yi understood his loophole. He took 2 identical cups and eggs and began to demonstrate. "Look, I put an egg in one of the cups and water in the other, but the volume of the water I added is about the size of an egg." Yang Yi smiled and handed the 2 cups to Shishi. "Now look which one is heavier." However, the difference in weight was negligible. Shishi weighed it in her hand, but she still couldn't figure it out. Yang Yi had no choice but to ask for a small electronic scale used in the kitchen to weigh vegetables. After comparing the weight data of the two, Shishi finally had an answer. "Now which do you think is heavier, the water or the egg?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. "The egg is heavier." Shishi's reaction was very fast. She kept up with her father's thinking speed. In addition, do you think iron of the same size is heavier? Or wood of the same size is heavier? Yang Yi asked. Shishi didn't need to do an experiment to know how to answer this question. She replied crisply, "Iron is heavier." "That's right. Under the premise of the same size, iron is heavier than wood, and eggs are heavier than water. We call the reason why it's heavier is that it's denser. Yang Yi still used iron and wood as an analogy. It means that its small body is stuffed with more and heavier things. Cece nodded her head as if she understood something. It was indeed difficult to explain, but Yang Yi felt that if he explained more, she would also understand more subtly. In the future, she would also be able to understand some of the scientific knowledge he was talking about. That's good. The reason why this dense egg can sink to the bottom of the water is that it's heavier than water. Don't you think so? Yang Yi said with a smile. She could understand this. The little girl nodded her little head with a serious face. Then we add salt to the water. The salt will be integrated into the water. That way, when we drink the salt water, we will feel the saltiness. Yang Yi made a relatively new analogy. It's like we're carrying a school bag with things in it. Now we have to unzip it and continue to stuff things in it. Won't it become heavier? Yes. She continued to nod. Then why is that? Yang Yi smiled and asked Shishi a small question. Because Shishi still didn't understand. At this moment, facing her father's question, she was confused again. Murphy listened to the side with great interest. Seeing Shishi say that she understood for a while and then open her mouth but couldn't answer, she couldn't help but say, "Didn't your father say just now? It's because its density has increased, so it's also heavier." Yang Yi smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. We now understand that after adding salt, the salt water will be heavier than water." I know because it has salt. Shishi actively rushed to say at this moment. That's right. If you continue to add salt, it will also become heavier. Yang Yi didn't intend to talk about the more profound concept of solubility for the time being. He only said, because the salt water has become heavier, when it is heavier than an egg, then the lighter egg will float, right? Cece's eyebrows danced as she listened. She didn't know if she really understood, but she kept nodding her head. Let's see if we can apply today's discovery to a wider range of examples. Yang Yi smiled and said, for example, do you think that swimming in the sea, like swimming in the sea in the summer, is easier to float in the water than swimming in our freshwater swimming pool? How could Shishi remember these two feelings? However, although she couldn't compare which of the two swimming was easier to float, Shishi still understood what her father wanted to say. The little girl giggled and said happily, I know, because the sea is also salty. There's salt. That's right. Yang Yi praised and gave a thumbs up. Papa, let's continue to play with other experiments. It's so interesting. Shishi waited for her father to finish talking about these principles and couldn't wait to shout again. It was such a big book, so there must be a lot of interesting content. Shishi laughed in high spirits, while Tong Tong looked at her from the side. He couldn't understand these principles, but the little fellow felt that his sister was smiling so happily, so there must be something very interesting. His little eyes were filled with envy and anticipation. He really wanted to play with his sister. The shooting of Yu Zui had been going on for more than a month. Recently, the crew went to the south to shoot some local scenes in Yangcheng City. As an important supporting role, Guazi also went there. However, the weather suddenly turned cold, and the news reported that the cold air had not been seen in 10 years. Tan Huijian began to worry about whether Guazi, who was further south in Yangcheng City, would be frozen to death. There was a popular saying on the internet, I'm a wolf from the north, but I froze into a husky in the south. Although it was a joke, there was some truth to it. The cold in winter in Guangdong province was humid and cold. Although the temperature looked high, the high humidity made the cold feel as if the cold air was going to penetrate into the bones, making people feel uncomfortable. Therefore, when Tan Huijian called Guazi, she suddenly asked where Guazi's agent was now. Why are you asking about Ding Xiang? Guazi became alert. She's in Jiang City. She still has schoolwork, so she can't run around with me before she graduates. At this moment, Ding Xiang, who was sitting next to Guazi, nervously straightened her back and looked at Guazi. Chapter 967. Guazi was too nervous. He was afraid that his mother would be suspicious if she found out that Ding Xiang was sitting next to him at night, so he lied to her. But who would have thought that Tan Huijian would happily say, "Ah, that's good. Invite her to the house." Guazi's eyes instantly widened. Tan Huijian said something about asking Ding Xiang to come over, but he didn't listen carefully. He covered his phone and turned to look at Ding Xiang. He mouthed to Ding Xiang in a panic, "My mom wants to see you." Ding Xiang was panicking too. She pointed at the phone and signaled to Guazi. "You're still on the phone. Don't ignore your mom." Guazi put the phone back to his ear and coughed. "Mom, I don't think it's necessary to invite Ding Xiang over, right? Also, she has other things to do." "Well, in 2 days Yang Huan, Yang Yi's sister and my partner in the Limit Challenge, will be coming to Yangcheng for filming. Senior Ding Xiang is going to accompany her." Ding Xiang was confused. She shrugged at Guazi. "Why do you have to lie to your mom? Yang Huan is in Guangzhou too." Ding Xiang was worried that her mother was really looking for her for something urgent. Besides, the more lies she told, the easier it was for her to be exposed. Guazi said that Yang Huan was in Jiangqing too. Wasn't that a huge risk? Of course, Ding Xiang didn't need to worry. Guazi soon understood what it meant to shoot yourself in the foot. Tan Huijian laughed happily. "Isn't that even better? I was thinking about how to ask her. After all, it's hard for her to make a trip to Guangzhou. It's even better that she wants to go there herself. I have something that I need her to bring to you." It turned out that Tan Huijian invited Ding Xiang over for something that Guazi didn't hear. She invited Ding Xiang over for dinner, because she wanted Ding Xiang to help her carry something. Now Guazi made up an excuse that Ding Xiang had to go. Now that Nanny Gua knew that Ding Xiang was in Jiang City and was preparing to go to Yang City, wasn't she the best candidate? But she's in school. On such a cold day, Guazi was sweating profusely. He stuttered as he tried to think of an excuse to reject his mother's request. "Don't worry, I'll send someone to pick her up." Tan Huijian was born into a wealthy family in Min Province, so he was very generous with his words. Guazi scratched his head hard, but couldn't think of a suitable reason. But at this moment, a small notebook was handed over, and Guazi subconsciously took it. This was a small notebook that Ding Xiang carried with her to record some work requirements at any time. Guazi saw a line of beautiful words written on it. "Promise your mother." Guazi turned around and saw Ding Xiang's angry expression. She glared at Guazi, indicating that Guazi should respond according to her request. "How about this, Mom? I'll call Senior Ding Xiang and ask her." Guazi looked at Ding Xiang as he made up a few random words. He quickly hung up the phone. Seeing that Guazi had hung up the phone, Ding Xiang said anxiously, "Why do you have to ask? Why don't you just say yes to your mother? Your mother wants to talk to me about something. How can you just say no?" Guazi was actually thinking for his girlfriend. He explained, "But you're in Yang City now. We can't let you go back to Jiang City in this weather, right? It's too cold." Ding Xiang was touched and amused. She said, "But we can't just ignore your mother's request. She wants me to bring something for you. And you said that I'm in Jiang City, and that I'm preparing to come to Yang City. If I don't go, won't I leave a bad impression on her? How can I put on such airs?" Guazi scratched his head. He knew that he had messed up this matter. "All right, I don't blame you. I know you're doing this for my own good. But you still have to tell your mother that I'll go to your house tomorrow." Ding Xiang held Guazi's hand and said gently, "You can't leave a bad impression on your mother. I'll buy a plane ticket and fly back to Jiang City later." Guazi said in distress, "But it's too hard on you." Ding Xiang was very determined at this moment. She said, "You have to give me a chance to perform. You can't always stand up for me. How will your parents view me?" And so the matter was settled. That evening, Ding Xiang took a plane back to Jiang City. The first season of China's Voice had ended, but its popularity had not dissipated. The champion, Su Lu, held a press conference the next day under the arrangement of her company. She announced that she would be starting to prepare her first album. The record company that she was signed to had even invited Su Lu's mentor, Luo Jian, to be her music producer. This showed that the record company that Su Lu was signed to valued Su Lu and treated her as a very important newcomer to be groomed. But some of the contestants were not so lucky. Although they were signed to management companies or record companies, those companies did not intend to invest resources in grooming them. After all, although these contestants had good voices, they still had some flaws. For example, their skin was too dark, or they were too short, or their looks were plain. This was also why they could not make a name for themselves in the music industry. Compared to the artists that the companies had chosen, these contestants were a far cry. However, they didn't invite these students back for a meal for free. Taking advantage of the fact that China's voice was still popular, and these contestants still had a place in the audience's memory, the companies arranged for them to frequently participate in some commercial activities. From the looks of it, these contestants' schedules were packed to the brim. They were sent to and fro by cars, accompanied by 3 to 5 managers and assistants. This lineup was very much like a celebrity's. Even looking at how they were dressed like nouveau riche and how arrogant they were in the news, it seemed that they were even more popular than Sulu, who had just announced her new album. Could it be that the champion did not develop as well as these contestants who had been eliminated early on? Perhaps only these contestants who did not know the truth were proud of themselves. The industry insiders could see it clearly, but they would not explain it to the public. These contestants might be glamorous now, but in a few months' time, when Sulu finished recording her album and was ready for her official debut after the company's training, they would have been buried in the sea of people in the entertainment industry. In fact, the entertainment industry was just that cruel. In other words, the world was just that cruel. If they remained stagnant and continued to show off their old ways, such people would sooner or later be overtaken by the latecomers. One had to know that other than debuting singers, there were thousands of people who wanted to replace them. Popularity was a consumable. When the audience's interest in them began to fade, when their uniqueness gradually became undistinguishable, that would be the time for them to leave the stage. At that time, they would probably only be able to live in the media's gloating. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.